Chapter 204. A cry of pain came from the lobby. Ruhan, Fong Ling, Haydn and others immediately rushed from the back room to the central room. But when they saw Mei Ruhan's situation, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Mei Ruhan pulled out the barb on her wrist and smiled embarrassedly. "There is a wooden barb on the counter. I was careless. Sorry to scare you." "It doesn't matter." Haydn scratched his head and said with a smile, "I will ask someone to fix it tomorrow morning. Then, it will be smooth and covered with a cloth." "You're too careless. Your wrist is bleeding. Wait for me. I will get the medicine box for you." Fong Ling checked the wound on Mei Ruhan's hand and then ran back to the inner room. When everyone left, Mei Ruhan felt warm in her heart. Everyone in the Linli building was like her family and cared about her very much. "Why is my wrist hot?" Mei Ruhan looked down and pinched her left wrist. She frowned. It was just a small wooden thorn, and it had been pulled out. It should not have such a big reaction. As her wrist became hotter and hotter, Mei Ruhan suddenly panicked. She pinched her wrist with her hand, as if it could make her feel more comfortable. At this moment, there was a soft sound. An orange halo like a bracelet suddenly appeared on her smooth wrist. It was exuding a gentle heat, which made Mei Ruhan feel very warm. "What is this? Why do I have this thing on me?" Mei Ruhan curiously reached out to touch it, but her fingers passed through the halo and couldn't touch it at all. The orange halo only lasted for half a breath, and then it faded away. No matter how Mei Ruhan pressed it, it would not appear again. Strange. Mei Ruhan tilted her head and was puzzled. She yawned and suddenly felt very sleepy. She couldn't open her eyes. "Forget it. Let's do the account tomorrow." Mei Ruhan staggered to the room and slept soundly without taking off her clothes. Fong Ling found her with the medicine box and smiled helplessly. "Sister Mei is really tired these days." In the next few days, Mei Ruhan was a little absent-minded. She always made mistakes in the account. From time to time, she would be in a daze for a long time, which made Haydn and others worried. They wanted to ask a doctor for Mei Ruhan. Fortunately, Mei Ruhan finally recovered when Luo Yichen came back with others. "Brother Luo, you're finally back." Before Luo Yichen entered the door, he was hugged by her. The cold smile on his face immediately turned soft. He comforted her softly. "Let's go in first." The disciples of the Linli building, who had just emerged from the secluded site, were all confused. So Protector Chen knew how to smile? "Go in. I just let you become the official disciples of the Linli building. Do you learn to be in a daze and be lazy?" Fong Mu's cold voice sounded behind him. After being an instructor in the secluded site for half a year, his temperament seemed to have changed a little. Hearing that, everyone immediately reacted and entered the Linli building in an orderly manner. Early in the morning, old Li, who had drunk so much that his eyes were blurry, came over with a wine pot in his arms. He stammered, "Who are these people? Killing intent is soaring." Fong Mu's face immediately returned to a bright and warm smile. He smiled warmly and said, "Sir, they are all new waiters of the winery." "Waiter?" Lao Li held the flagon and walked away. Fong Mu's face instantly became cold again. He looked at the newcomers who were shocked and shouted coldly, "Go in." "Yes. Yes." The newcomers couldn't help but criticize in their hearts. It turned out that Protector Chen and Protector Mu were normal people. Then they still arranged so many terrible training tasks for them in the secluded site. In the underground addendum, 20 newcomers lined up in a row. All of them were in the acquired 9th hurdle. It only took half a year. With the support of Su Li's secret medicine, these ordinary people, who obviously didn't have much aptitude, all became seniors in the acquired 9th hurdle. Fong Ling put her hands on her hips and looked at a group of uneasy newcomers in the room. She walked to Fong Mu and pulled his sleeves to complain, "There are only 20 people. My sister is in Yunjing. It is definitely not enough." The newcomers were still guessing Fong Ling's identity. When they suddenly heard Fong Ling say, "Yunjing," they were all shocked. But soon they concealed the shock and continued to maintain a calm appearance. Fong Mu helplessly touched Fong Ling's eyebrows and transmitted the sound in silence. "Of course, there are more than 20 people who have been trained. But only these 20 people are barely competent and have been strictly selected for their loyalty. Fong Ling suddenly understood. Luo Yichen also nodded and said, the quality is more than the number of people going to Yunjing. So many people are enough. It is not easy to arrange more people. Run, how about contacting people in Yunjing? Mei Ruhan nodded quickly and said, yes. Sister Xuetong said that we can go there. Tianbao Pharmacy is short of manpower to transport a large number of medicinal materials to Yunjing. They will set off in 3 days. Luo Yichen's eyes flashed. He turned back and said in a deep voice, this is your last test. Within 3 days, you must mix into the transportation team of Tianbao Pharmacy by any means. Yes, Protector Chen. Everyone said in unison, and their eyes were burning. After half a year in that remote place, they finally had a chance to show their talents. If someone can't get in, it means that you are not capable enough. You will not even have the chance to see Mr. Li. Go back to the secluded site and continue to practice. Do you hear me? Yes. For a moment, the shouting became louder. Mei Ruhan covered her mouth and chuckled. These guys were in high morale purely because they were afraid to go back to the secluded site. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her wrist. A familiar scene flashed through her mind. It seemed that she had experienced the same thing a long time ago. Ruhan? Hearing someone calling her, Mei Ruhan came to her sense. She immediately saw a pair of eyes full of concern. It was Brother Luo. She blushed and turned her head. I'm fine, Brother Luo. I just thought of something. Mei Ruhan smiled sweetly. Why did she think so much? Even if there was such a thing as the previous life, she didn't need it. Brother Luo was enough. So, 3 days later, 20 newcomers of the Linli building became temporary workers of Tianbao Pharmacy without exception. Fong Mu also went with them. After all, these people were elites that had been carefully selected from hundreds of people. If there were any mountain rocks along the way, it would be a huge waste. It should be known that the amount of money spent on 20 people in the past 6 months was more than what he had spent. Luo Yichen was unwilling to go to Yunjing because of Mei Ruhan. Haydn had reached the acquired 9th hurdle for a long time, but he hadn't found the opportunity to break through. He couldn't go out. Only he could come out. Fong Mu curled his lips. It was a long journey. It was not easy to be a babysitter. Fortunately, he could see his eldest brother after arriving in Yunjing. Fong Mu's eyes flashed with excitement. After practicing AO sword skills, he also realized the opportunity to break through and successfully broke through to the inborn first hurdle. This time, he must let his eldest brother see that he didn't lose the face of the Fong family and didn't let Miss Su down. Half a month later, the team of Tianbao Pharmacy arrived at the gate of Yunjing. Tianbao Pharmacy was an old industry in Yunjing. Nothing had happened. The gate inspection passed safely. Fong Mu, dressed in coarse linen clothes and dressed like a manservant, pushed the handcart into the city. He only felt a pain in the ass. If he could do it again, he would definitely ask Luo Yichen to come out and have a taste. He ate dry food on the way and almost tasted bland. However, those guys were full of enthusiasm and expectation. They were not defeated by the boredom of the half-month. The handcart of the Tianbao Pharmacy arrived at the back door. The supervisor dismissed the staff. The 20 guys immediately left and then gathered in the alley not far from the Tianbao Pharmacy. Fong Mu came last. He glanced at the newcomers who gathered and quieted down. He looked around and suddenly smiled to the air. Brother Qingning, I am here. You can't avoid me, can you? When did you surpass me in cultivation? Chu Qingning, who was hiding in the alley, suddenly appeared, which shocked everyone. When did a person hide there? They had clearly checked it just now and didn't find anything. Fong Mu didn't see his old friend for a long time, so he was slightly excited. He hammered Chu Qingning's fist and said with a smile, I didn't surpass you. You are the only one who steals wine in the restaurant. Chu Qingning couldn't help but smell it. He immediately scolded with a smile, You really have a dog's nose? Let's go. We can't stay here for a long time. Let's go back first. When these guys come, I can dismiss the temporary waiters. Ordinary people are really restricted. They even need to be on guard to open an underground addendum. On the way, Chu Qingning came to the two carriages with others and smiled. In order not to attract attention, he had already prepared. One day later, the Linli building in Yunjing City was brand new. The waiters kept shouting at the door. Since the opening of the Linli building, there were many repeat customers. Finally, the business was booming. Xian Jingzhou saw it, but he frowned. He was worried about a lot of things. The business of Zhouyiwei Winery was getting worse and worse. How could he live in the future? He hadn't drunk the Liehua spirits for a long time. Chen Gong didn't come, and he had no money to buy the spirits. Damn it. On the first day, he saw that all the new waiters were in the acquired 9th hurdle. On the second day, they all became ordinary people. He was not blind. Moreover, he thought that Ling Qinglan also came here before. The Linli building was obviously an invisible sect. He and his wife were cheated. Besides, they drank their spirits and owed them a favor. Xian Jingzhou was in a cold sweat. Could it be that he and his wife were set up? The more he thought, the more suspicious he was. He didn't study these days. He stared at the Linli building, hoping to find something. At this moment, in the affiliated school of the National Academy, Su Li was quietly reading the AO sword skills in the study. This sword skills had been in her hands for a long time, but she didn't expect that the successor of Jin Qing AO in the previous life, Marquis Sword, rose suddenly. Although she had a little talent in swordsmanship, she seemed to be a little worse than Marquis Sword. However, after several months of study, she finally understood the 4th hurdle of the AO sword skills. When she mastered the true meaning of the 4th hurdle, she even dared to fight against the senior of the longevity realm who was beyond the inborn hurdle. Suddenly, Su Li frowned, and a sense of danger came from all directions. Although it was an intuition, the experience of fighting outside all year round in the previous life told her that someone wanted to kill her, and it was a senior. However, why didn't he do it? There was no one here, only the elite soldiers of the Lord Rue's mansion guarding outside the house. Could it be that he didn't dare? He was a senior above the inborn 7th hurdle, but he was so cautious. Su Li lowered her head, and her eyes flashed. She immediately got up and opened the door. Then the sense of danger disappeared completely. Sure enough, Su Li sneered in her heart, but she ordered on the surface, "Mammy Li, get ready. I want to go out for a walk." The man in the dark heard the words, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Chapter 205. Miss, is it really okay for you to go out without anyone? Mammy Li asked worriedly. It's not safe in the city recently. Su Li smiled and said, Don't worry, Mammy. It's daytime now. Don't those terrible things happen at night? I'm just going to the downtown. Nothing will happen. The man in the dark smiled slightly. She was so naive and pitiful. The carriage of the Lord Rue's mansion sent Su Li to the downtown street, and then Su Li got off. She really wandered in the downtown. She looked around as she walked, and touched all kinds of jewelry, but she didn't buy anything. It seemed that the style was not beautiful enough. The man took the bamboo hat and followed Su Li without a trace. He picked up the jewelry that Su Li had touched and looked at it. Finally, he hesitated for a moment and bought a hairpin that he thought was beautiful. Women were really troublesome. By the way, I heard that there is a new jewelry store on the next street. Let's go and have a look. But there is no one on that street. Will there be any danger? Su Li said to herself. Sometimes she hesitated and finally smiled. It should be okay to have a look. Then, Su Li walked cheerfully to the alley on the left where there was no one. When the man saw it, he immediately showed a ferocious killing intent and followed her into the alley without hesitation. Seeing Su Li walking not far in front of him, he quickly approached her without a sound. At the same time, a 3-foot-long sword appeared under his wide robe and stabbed at Su Li fiercely. Crack! The sound was wrong. The moment he heard the sword stabbing into her, the man's face changed instantly. He retreated into the downtown without saying a word. But at this moment, there was a slight sound of breaking the air behind him. When? The man in the bamboo hat was slightly shocked, but he was as calm as ice. He forcibly turned around and confronted Su Li. Ding! A huge and terrible force attacked along the tip of the sword. The long sword broke inch by inch and couldn't be used in the blink of an eye. It was a precious sword in the man's hand. Su Li's face slightly froze. She let go of the force and took a few steps back. She stamped her feet and rushed to the man empty-handed without saying a word. "Stupid!" The man in the bamboo hat sneered. She dared to rush over without a weapon. She was courting death. The cyan sword in his hand was aimed at Su Li's heart without hesitation. His feet flashed and he was about to take Su Li's life. At this moment, the bamboo-hatted man's expression suddenly changed. He stopped his attack and frantically retreated. He clutched his chest, the numbness spreading from his chest to the rest of his body. He was poisoned. When did this happen? Suddenly, he thought of something and took out a hairpin with trembling hands. So that was it. Su Li chuckled. "You dare to pick up the things that I have touched one by one. I really admire you. Don't worry, this poison won't kill you. It will only make you unable to move for 4 hours, and you will recover after a day and a night." Speaking of this, Su Li's eyes flashed. "In my opinion, you are probably a practitioner of the longevity realm, right? Furthermore, I'm heavily injured. Otherwise, I would have been heavily injured from that exchange just now." After saying that, Su Li reached out and wiped the bloody wound on her right hand. A green light flashed, and the wound quickly scabbed and fell off. Seeing this scene, the bamboo-hatted man's pupils shrank slightly. He raised his sword and faced it from a distance, and then hung it down weakly. His voice was low and hoarse. "Who are you?" At this moment he couldn't wait to go back and kill Wu Lirong first. What an ordinary woman of acquired 8th hurdle who only knew some simple healing methods. She was clearly a horrible female practitioner who mastered the power of Jupiter in the spiritual circle, and her cultivation was not much worse than his. Now he was seriously injured and couldn't even exert 10% of his strength. It was simply a fat meat that came to his door. She also mastered a variety of poison skills and didn't follow the gentleman's way in battle. Even when he was still in the sect, he didn't want to face such a horrible opponent at all. But he was unlucky to meet her in the secular world. Step, 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 Su Li walked toward him. The bamboo-hatted man wanted to move, but he was paralyzed and couldn't even speak. He could only watch Su Li approaching. Su Li picked up the man's right arm with one hand and lifted it 1 inch from the ground. Then she walked along the alley. "You won't kill me?" The bamboo-hatted man transmitted the sound with difficulty. Su Li smiled slightly and took the jade hairpin from his hand. "I am suddenly interested in you. Can't I?" Originally, Su Li always tortured and interrogated those who came to kill her first, and then killed them. But this man was a senior of the longevity realm from the spiritual circle. Besides, he was a man, and he just bought the jade hairpin. It was obvious that he was thinking about another woman. Would a practitioner of the longevity realm do the killer's business? For all these reasons, Su Li suddenly had a strong interest in this man. Maybe after sorting out her thoughts, she could let her leanly building have another free fighter of the longevity sword. Why not? Not long after, Su Li came to the back door of the leanly building with the bamboo-hatted man, who was confused. It was Chu Qingning who opened the door. Seeing that Su Li came here with this appearance and there was an outsider beside her, he was also confused. Then, Xian Jingzhou, who had been secretly observing next door, opened his eyes wide in surprise. Why did Su Li come here? "Su Li, what are you?" Before Chu Qingning finished his words, Su Li noticed that someone was spying on them. Without saying anything, she took the man in the bamboo hat and came in. Chu Qingning found that the man in the bamboo hat could not move and was held by Su Li all the way. Fang Yuan and others followed her to the top floor and looked at each other. They didn't know where Su Li brought a man here, just like Luo Yichen before. But this time, the man's condition was much better than that of Luo Yichen, who was covered with blood. Su Li took a cyan porcelain bottle from the table and put some water on the man's lips. It didn't take long for the man to feel that his mouth could move, but the other parts of his face were still numb and uncontrollable. The bamboo-hatted man was lifted, and Su Li saw the man's face clearly. It was very ordinary. She used the eye skill, but she couldn't see any clue. Was he the one who had done it? Su Li frowned and had a guess in her heart. The man's eyes were stimulated by the sudden bright light and burst into tears. At the same time, he also saw the scene in the room, which shocked him greatly. There were 3 young masters gathered here. Including Su Li, there were 4 young masters. The number of young masters was not less than that of his original sect. Young masters were also extremely precious in the spiritual circle. Those who could communicate with the heaven and earth and become inborn before the age of 20 were all gifted talents. In the future, they might even reach the legendary realm. Therefore, every supreme youth was a seed that was carefully protected in the true spirit sector. But now, he actually saw a number of young masters, who were enough to cause a big fight in the spiritual circle, gathered quietly in an inconspicuous winery in the secular world. Even with his well-informed vision, he couldn't help but be stunned. Su Li had been to the spiritual circle. Of course, she knew why the man was shocked. She was more vigilant. The AO sword skills must not be exposed. Otherwise, under the struggle of several major forces in the spiritual circle, the force she had just established would be destroyed. Thinking of this, Su Li teasingly said with a smile, "Killer, don't you want to say something?" "Killer?" The expressions of Fang Yuan and others changed slightly. This person was the killer who attacked Su Li. Why did Su Li bring this person to the Linli building? The man snorted coldly. He turned his head and said stubbornly, "Since I am in your hands, you can do whatever you want to me." Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows. She turned her palm and took out the jade hairpin. She squinted and smiled. "What about the future owner of this thing?" The man's eyes changed a few times in an instant. Finally, his expression dimmed and he fell into a long silence. Then, no matter how Su Li asked and how she goaded him, the man kept silent all the time. He seemed to be stubborn and eager to die. Su Li twisted her eyebrows and asked Chu Qingning and Fang Mu to take a bath first. She didn't know how long this man hadn't changed his clothes. He smelled like a beggar. Obviously, he was a practitioner of the longevity realm, but he didn't care about it at all. Why should I help him to take a bath? Chu Qingning stared at her. He didn't like to help a man to take a bath. Fang Mu was also speechless. He had just arrived in Yunjing for a short time. Why were the errands so unsuitable? Su Li tilted her head and said, "Among the 4 people here, only you and Fang Mu have the lowest cultivation? Do you have any opinion? Are you willing to let Yin Xuetong?" Thinking that Yin Xuetong would help other men to take a bath, Chu Qingning suddenly got goosebumps. Without saying anything, he carried the man and ran to the bathhouse. Fang Mu looked at him and laughed. Brother Qingning was still as funny as before. "Mu, you go with him." Su Li handed over a white porcelain bottle and said, "Poison the man every half an hour. Don't be careless." Fang Mu scratched his head and took it carefully. He was afraid that he would also be infected with the paralyzing poison. He thought for a while and couldn't help but ask, "Sister Su Li, the poison you refined can paralyze for 4 hours. Why do you have to be so careful?" Su Li shook her head and her eyes were full of deep meaning. "That person is different." Fang Yuan was surprised when he heard Su Li's words. Different? How could he be different? Su Li said that no one could survive this poison, whether inborn or acquired. Could it be, he is in the longevity realm? Su Li didn't hide it. As soon as she said that, the faces of the 2 people present changed. Fang Mu grasped the white porcelain bottle and immediately ran to the bathhouse. Half an hour. He would poison the man every quarter of an hour. Facing such a horrible enemy as the longevity realm, no matter how careful he was. The bathhouse had been boiling water all the time. Chu Qingning was angry. When he arrived at the bathhouse, he rolled up his sleeves and directly threw the man who couldn't move into the boiling water. Anyway, the inborn senior couldn't be burned to death. Su Li took it for granted. What did she mean by the lowest cultivation? It really pissed him off. Seeing the man who was still bubbling in the water, Chu Qingning showed a perverted smile. He ran into the bathtub, picked up the man, and said with an evil smile in his ear, "Motherfucker, I don't dare to fight against her, but I dare to train you hard. Even if I am tired to death today, I will let you wash a layer of skin." Then, all kinds of voices sounded in the bathhouse. Fong Mu stood aside and couldn't bear to look at it. He thought that if Chu Qingning knew that the man was in the longevity realm, his expression would be so wonderful. After a full hour, the humiliated man was dressed by Chu Qingning. He looked at Chu Qingning with murderous eyes. He couldn't wait to recover his ability to move now and press Chu Qingning to death in the water. Chu Qingning laughed out loud. He felt comfortable after he vented his anger. He looked back and saw the man staring at him. He immediately pointed at his nose and scolded, "What are you looking at? If you look at me again, I will throw you into the water and train you again." Qingning. What did you say? Yin Xuedong's voice suddenly came from behind. Chu Qingning's complacent face suddenly became stiff. He slowly looked back and saw Yin Xuedong's face full of grievances. She cried and said, "I didn't expect you to be such a person. I will ignore you." Chapter 206. Chu Qingning's miserable howl dragged all the way. Fong Mu looked at the handsome man standing next to the bathhouse with a confused face. He was confused. Wasn't it over? He went to call Yin Xuedong. Was there anything that he couldn't understand? Fong Mu's face gradually became strange. He looked the man up and down. The man finally couldn't help but say angrily, "It's not what you think." "It's the same as what Brother Qingning said." Fong Mu touched his chin and murmured. Suddenly, the man's face became uglier. "Your messy hair and beard were dealt with by Brother Qingning. You really look much younger. But I didn't expect that you are only in your 30s. I really don't understand why you want to die at such a young age." Fong Mu shook his head and reapplied the poison to the man. Then he carried the man upstairs. The man glanced at Chu Qingning and Yin Xuedong, who were quarreling in the corner of the first floor. Chu Qingning was explaining something impatiently. His forehead was sweating, but it made him feel warm. He couldn't help but miss that woman. The more he missed her, the more unwilling he was. It was not easy for him to live until now. He didn't see her. How could he be willing to die? How could he be willing to die? The young man's name was Qingning. Her name was Ning Qing. Even their names were so similar. Did God not want him to die? There was confusion in the man's eyes, and Fong Mu was still murmuring in his ears, "Senior, you should confess. Otherwise, Su Li will not let you die easily according to her character. This is our base camp in Yunjing. After she brings you here, you only have two choices. One is to die, and the other is to join our Linli building." The man's eyes flashed. He tried to assassinate Su Li. Although he was easily solved by Su Li, he once wanted to kill Su Li. Would Su Li accept such a person? Perhaps Fong Mu felt that the man's previous experience was too miserable, so he kept talking all the way. "Senior, although I am living a good life now, a year ago, I was just driven into the barracks with a broken family and almost died on the battlefield. Finally, I fell into the prisoner camp and was saved by Miss Su Li. Miss Su Li and we have an agreement, so we will gather together. Maybe our goals are not the same, but we can help each other and support each other until we have the ability to take revenge." Fong Mu was lost in memories. In the end, he found that he seemed to have said too much. He smiled embarrassedly and carried the man into Su Li's attic. Anyway, this person was going to die. It didn't matter to talk too much with a dead person. Fong Mu didn't know that it was the agreement he just mentioned that made the man's pupils shrink, and his thoughts changed quietly. At this moment, Su Li had asked Fong Yuan to go back to practice. She was alone in the attic on the top floor. After Fong Mu put the man down, he closed the door and left. The fate of the man depended on Su Li's mood and the choice of the man. Su Li raised her eyes, and a golden light flashed in her eyes. She had confirmed that the man had not disguised himself and had been using his original appearance. She picked up the cyan long sword sent by Mu on the table, stroked the sword with her fingertips and looked at it carefully. Her fingertips tapped gently, and the sword made a light sound, like a dragon's roar. This was a peerless sword, much better than the Hongyuan sword that Ling Qinglan brought before. "You are really from the spiritual circle," Su Li suddenly said. The first sentence made the man who was ready to negotiate with Su Li confused. "How do you know?" the man said with difficulty. If the woman knew his identity and told the sect, he would be doomed. "You seem to be very nervous." Su Li smiled lightly, and her eyes were shining. She stared at the long sword and said unhurriedly, "Don't worry. I just inferred from this sword. It is not easy to get such a long sword with the forging technology of the secular world. I am afraid that there are only 1 or 2 swords in the treasury of the entire Dahan country. You are obviously an outsider and can only come from the spiritual circle." Speaking of this, Su Li raised her head with interest and said with a smile, "What? You seem to have changed your mind. Don't you want to die in silence?" "I don't want to die." The man turned his eyes with difficulty and saw the jade hairpin on the table quietly. "As you expected, I have to see someone, so I can't die." Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly and didn't continue to ask this time. She needed to think about how to use the man in front of her to counterattack Wu Lirong. If there was no accident, it must be Wu Lirong who attacked her. She didn't know how Wu Lirong had a relationship with this person, but fortunately, Wu Lirong was not supported by the force of the spiritual circle as she thought, but just a loner who fled in embarrassment. "I heard that you have an agreement with your subordinates. Can I make an exchange with you with my life?" The man couldn't help but speak first. After changing his mind, he naturally didn't want to be dealt with by Su Li in this way, so he immediately began to actively look for opportunities. Su Li raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Your Excellency, your life is in my hands now. How can you exchange it? If you want to make an exchange with me, it's not impossible. How about working for me for 10 years? The man's pupils shrank slightly. "Do you dare to use me?" "Why not?" Su Li changed her sitting posture lazily and continued to say, "You should know better than me about the means of people who practice poison. If you still want to continue to attack me, I can naturally poison you for the 2nd time, the 3rd time. If you do it too many times, I may not be so patient, and it's better to let you die directly." The man was silent. What Su Li said was not unreasonable, but as long as he attacked fast enough, Su Li would also be injured. However, he had changed his mind now and didn't want to continue to kill Su Li. That was meaningless, because he knew that Wu Lirong was not a person who kept promises. If there was a better choice, why should he hang on to one tree? "It's not my intention to attack you. It's Wu Lirong." The man said the deal he made with Wu Lirong before. When Su Li heard the 2 words, Ning Qing, her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. There was really such a coincidence in the world. In her impression, Ning Qing had always been alone. Every time she mentioned her husband, her temperament would change greatly. However, this matter still needed to be verified. All kinds of thoughts lingered in her mind and then quieted down. Wu Lirong really didn't die. Su Li rubbed her chin and suddenly raised her head to ask a question that had nothing to do with the matter. "What's your name?" The man suddenly froze and didn't understand Su Li's intention. But since he had reached a dead end, he didn't intend to hide it anymore. Without hesitation, he said his name. "My surname is Wen, and my name is Tingshan. My name is Wen Tingshan." Su Li's expression suddenly changed and she blurted out, "Are you Wen Tingshan of the Wanjian sect?" "You know the Wanjian sect. You are indeed a person of the spiritual circle." Wen Tingshan's face showed bitterness. This gamble was wrong. The Wanjian sect was offering a reward to arrest him in the spiritual circle and the martial arts circle. He fled all the way and barely escaped to the secular world to hide after being seriously injured. Unexpectedly, he fell into the hands of the people of the spiritual circle. No one would not be tempted by the reward offered by the Wanjian sect. Su Li was a young master, so that kind of reward was more attractive to her. At this moment, when Tingshan didn't know that Su Li was thinking about another thing. In the previous life, when Tingshan was the head of the Wanjian sect, he had great cultivation and was one of the few big shots standing on the pyramid of the spiritual circle. At that time, she was just a nonentity struggling at the bottom of the spiritual circle. When Tingshan was the existence that she needed to look up to. What she did should not affect the spiritual circle. That was to say, when Tingshan was so miserable in the previous life and this life, he was not only seriously injured, but also worse than a beggar. She couldn't help but be surprised. This was a big fish. If she didn't catch it, wouldn't she feel sorry for herself? Thinking of this, Su Li decisively said, "When Tingshan, Work for me for 10 years as the previous agreement. I will help you get through the difficulties and help you reunite with Ning Qing. If you can agree, the agreement between you and me will take effect immediately." This time, Wen Tingshan was completely stunned. Did Su Li know what she was talking about? In the face of the horrible reward offered by the Wanjian sect, she didn't change her expression at all? Or did she look down on the things of the Wanjian sect because of her background? For a moment, Wen Tingshan was completely confused. "I'll give you time to think about it here. I'll come back in a day and a night." Su Li knew that haste did not lead to speed. She left a sentence and left with Wen Tingshan. At the moment when she passed by Wen Tingshan immediately felt that the numbness in his body receded like a tide. He could move. He looked back and saw Su Li close the door and disappear from his sight. There was a deep complexity in his eyes. Wasn't she afraid that he was just pretending to enter the Linli building and kill her? However, she didn't notice the method of detoxification just now. If he acted rashly, he might die very quickly. Undoubtedly, he was very afraid of Su Li's poison. So now, whether he should run away and continue to pursue alone or stay, he really needed to think about it carefully. For a whole day and night, no one came to disturb him, not even a person who delivered food. Wen Tingshan seemed to turn into a sculpture, standing motionless in the room. When the morning light shone on his face the next day, his eyes instantly lit up. Life was just a gamble. He had gambled once, so why not gamble again? At this moment, Su Li opened the door. She wore a plain dress and her sleeves fluttered. She walked lightly like a fairy under the breeze. Her skin was delicate and her facial features were perfect and delicate. She was like the most beautiful work of art in the world. When Tingshan turned around and was in a daze. This eccentric and vicious girl who used poison was so breathtakingly beautiful. Could there be such a perfect woman in the world? Although he didn't want to admit it, she was indeed much more beautiful than Qing. But in his heart, there was only Ning Qing. No matter how beautiful Su Li was, he just admired her beauty. "It seems that you have thought it through." Su Li floated over. Her hair was blown by the wind. She hadn't withdrawn the nothing unusual for a long time. She also needed to take a breath. She took this opportunity to test Wen Tingshan, and the result was satisfactory. "Yes." Wen Tingshan calmed down. He said in a calm and firm tone, "From now on, I will regard myself as a member of the Linli building. I hope you can keep the agreement." Su Li smiled and her eyes were like crescent moons. She said, "Very good. There is finally a senior of the longevity realm in the Linli building. Give me your hand. I will solve your injury first and then talk about other things." Chapter 207. They sat down, and when Tingshan stretched out his wrist for Su Li to diagnose. Su Li's fingertips touched Wen Tingshan's pulse, and her perception immediately spread to Wen Tingshan's whole body. She was shocked by the severity of his internal injuries. 5 ribs were broken, almost 40% of his tendons and vessels were broken, and his internal organs were damaged and bleeding. It was terrible. In addition, there were more than a dozen breaths left in his tendons and vessels. That was to say, along the way, when Tingshan had fought with at least a dozen practitioners in the same realm or higher realm, and he had successfully escaped. With such a serious injury, he could suppress and assassinate her as if nothing had happened. Besides, he still had the upper hand in a head-on fight. Was this Wen Tingshan? If he was in his heyday, she was afraid that she could not defeat him. Su Li faintly felt that she seemed to have a great fighter. "Did I scare you?" Wen Tingshan forced a stiff and ugly smile on his face. "You should have thought of this when you agreed with us. The elders of the Wanjian sect are not easy to deal with. It was not easy for me to escape." The Wanjian sect. The people from the 10,000 Swords Pavilion were actually chasing after him. Wasn't he from the 10,000 Swords Pavilion? Su Li's expression remained unchanged, but her mind was slightly shocked. Wen Tingshan seemed to have misunderstood something. It seemed that she not only picked up a great senior, but also picked up a big trouble. After thinking for a moment, Su Li raised her head and said, "The self-healing ability of seniors in the longevity realm is extremely strong. Your external injuries have been healed for a long time, and only severe internal injuries are left. The state of your body is really a mess. Any warrior of the inborn realm would vomit blood and fall to the ground in such a situation. It's not wise for you to move with the genuine energy of the longevity realm. You need to stay in bed and rest. Leave the recuperation to me. When Tingshan looked at Su Li murmuring and taking out a piece of paper to write down the prescription. The vigilance in his eyes slowly faded away. At this moment, Su Li really became a doctor, with a focused and sacred look. The perfect combination of a poison master and a pharmacist was like the existence of half angel and half devil, revealing a strong evil spirit. But her angelic appearance made him unable to associate her with a poison master. What a contradictory existence, when Tingshan sighed in his heart. On the other side, Su Li also put down the pen and paper. She said with a smile, "Next, we have to ask Protector Shan to suffer for a period of bitter treatment." When Tingshan saw the dense treatment plans on the table, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Then he suddenly remembered something and shook his head. "I made an appointment with Wu Lirong to see her within 3 days." Su Li smiled gently. "I don't have anything else, but I have a lot of skulls. I can lend them to you. By the way, I have never met the person who killed my mother. Protector Shan, please introduce me to him." Su Li's tone was normal, as if she was visiting an old friend. But when Tingshan heard that the killing intent was more fierce than a hysterical cry for revenge, he could understand how ruthless Su Li was to kill her mother, but what did she mean by borrowing the head? After a quarter of an hour, when Tingshan put on his original clothes, put on a bamboo hat and stood in the stone room, looking at a large number of coffins in the stone room, he finally understood what Su Li meant by, "There are a lot of skulls." Su Li pointed to the new 20 coffins and said, "These are the corpse puppets robbed from the Lianshi cult. No matter how you use them, you won't feel distressed. Since you can make Wu Lirong fake her death, it should not be difficult for you to disguise the corpse puppets, right?" When Tingshan nodded blankly. The corpse puppets robbed. He had also heard of the Lianshi cult. It was a top force in the martial arts circle. Such a force should be robbed by Su Li. Looking at the 20 corpse puppets, all of which were above the inborn realm, when Tingshan could imagine how painful it would be for the Lianshi cult to lose these corpse puppets. At this time, In Shuetong pushed the door and came in. Seeing Wen Tingshan with a cold face, she said, "Protector Shan, nice to meet you." Wen Tingshan was stunned, and then nodded gently. He didn't know why there was a strange feeling in his heart. When he was called first senior fellow apprentice by thousands of disciples in the Wanjian sect, he didn't feel anything. Su Li, most of the faces of the 20 corpse puppets were injured by hidden weapons before, and they need to be repaired. Only the faces of number 14 and number 16 are intact and can be used for disguise. In Shuetong opened a booklet and said, she had a detailed record of the various military arrangements in the Linli building. She was shocked when she saw Su Li refining the corpse puppets. She felt that the skill of refining the corpse was too terrifying. Later, after the rainy night in the Wu family, In Shuetong's cognition was immediately distorted by Su Li. With her own ability and profound insight, Su Li easily let the people of the Lianshi cult and the Hehuan sect bite each other. She was so wise. Then I will use number 16. Su Li sat down and made a decision. She asked casually, "By the way, where is Chu Qingning? Why didn't I see him just now?" Hearing the name of Chu Qingning, Wen Tingshan's eyes were immediately brighter than light bulbs. His wolf-like eyes immediately made In Shuetong's scalp numb. In Shuetong smiled awkwardly and said, "Qingning said he wanted to go out to avoid the trouble." "What did he do?" Su Li was confused. She really didn't know what Chu Qingning did. But judging from Wen Tingshan's angry look, it was probably not a good thing. Hearing that Chu Qingning slipped away, Wen Tingshan snorted coldly and said in a deep voice, "He has self-awareness. Otherwise, even if you stop me, I will beat him up." At this moment, Chu Qingning, who had hidden out of the city, was lying on the crooked tree on the low hill beside the official road. His face was full of bad luck. Hearing that Yin Xuetong told him that Wen Tingshan not only surrendered, but also was a senior of the longevity realm, he was so scared that his face turned green. If he had known that Wen Tingshan was a senior of the longevity sword, he would not have offended him anyway. Fang Mu clearly knew it, but he didn't remind him. I didn't bring any money, so I can only go to the mountain to hunt. I am thinking about how to go back. Chu Qingning scratched his head and couldn't think of a way to deal with it. He could only turn over and jump off the crooked tree. He was about to rush to the depths of the forest. At this moment, a long caravan appeared on the official road. Chu Qingning fixed his eyes on it and immediately saw the flag in front of the caravan from a distance. It turns out to be the cloth shop under the jurisdiction of the embroidery workshop in Yunjing City. But doesn't the cloth shop in Yunjing only transport goods into the city every half a month? The last time they entered the city was less than 10 days ago. Why did they come again? With the help of Chu Lu, they were very well informed. They knew the inflow channels of various forces in Yunjing City. The cloth shop shortened the delivery time. If there was no accident, some people from the martial arts circle sneaked into the city. Tut, don't worry. There are still 2 months before the 8th day of the 12th lunar month. Chu Qingning murmured. Suddenly, he fixed his eyes and saw an acquaintance. A young manservant mingled with the shop assistants in the cloth shop, kept his head down and walked with the caravan. It seemed that he was tired of bowing his head. He raised his head and moved. Coincidentally, Chu Qingning saw his face. Lin Yanxing. Wasn't he Lin Yanxing? Chu Qingning was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. How long had it been since Lin Yanxing was exiled last year? Not only was he saved on the way of exile, but he also recovered and could move so quickly? Being stared at by Chu Qingning, Lin Yanxing suddenly felt something. He suddenly turned his head and saw a crooked tree swaying in the wind. He was confused. Then someone seemed to say something to him. He immediately lowered his head and walked with the caravan again. Chu Qingning hid behind him and swallowed. He was covered with a layer of cold sweat. Wow, this guy not only recovered, but also made rapid progress in cultivation. He could even find that Chu Qingning was peeping at him. Which force is it? Their medical skills are comparable to Su Li's. It is not easy for the Wu family to be cleaned up in the city. It seems that there are many ruthless people coming. Chu Qingning murmured and watched the caravan go away. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. If he told Su Li about this, he might be able to get protection from Wen Tingshan. Ha, Lin Yanxing, you are really my savior. Chu Qingning was excited and immediately went back. At this moment, Wen Tingshan quietly left the Linli building. He put on a bamboo hat and took the ball-shaped thing wrapped in rags. He silently walked through the alley and returned to the bungalow where he hid. He was completely silent. He didn't need to do anything more. Wu Lirong would definitely come within 3 days. In the past 3 days, Wu Lirong had been secretly monitoring the affiliated school of the National Academy. Since Su Li went out in the morning 2 days ago, she had never come back. At this moment, the people of the Lord Rue's mansion had sent troops to search the whole city quietly. The news had not spread yet, but she couldn't help being excited. That senior took action. Sure enough, Su Li had no chance to resist in the hands of such a person. As long as she went to the bungalow again, she might see Su Li's bloody head. But she didn't dare. At least not now. Although the senior knew that she faked her death, he didn't know that she had lost the ability to send people of the Wu mansion. If she went there and was exposed, she might die in the hands of that person. The horror of a few days ago was still vivid in Wu Lirong's mind. Fear and viciousness flashed in her eyes. She had to find a way to deal with it. Time went by unknowingly. On the 3rd day, the people of the Lord Rue's mansion had been searching crazily and alarmed the city guards. They gradually intended to expand the search scope. Wu Lirong was afraid that Wen Tingshan would escape directly. Although she was not fully prepared, she still went to the bungalow. As soon as she opened the door, Wu Lirong smelled a bloody smell. Her pupils shrank and she saw Wen Tingshan still sitting in the original position. There was a head wrapped in white cloth beside him. She looked happy and wanted to confirm it, but she was scolded by Wen Tingshan. Wait! Wu Lirong was slightly stiff. Senior, why? Wen Tingshan's eyes were cold. Although he joined Su Li, he still wanted to confirm some things. I have done 2 things for you. When will you send someone to help me find Ning Qing? Hearing Wen Tingshan's cold question, Wu Lirong had already prepared for it. She promised without panic, "Don't worry. In the 3 days when you were busy killing Su Li, I was not idle. I had already sent someone to investigate the news. Now I have invited all the Ning Qing in Yunjing City back to the Wu Mansion. As long as you show me their heads, I will bring them to you immediately." Chapter 208. Of course. Wu Lirong nodded without hesitation. When Tingshan narrowed his eyes and slowly uncovered the rag. Seeing that when Tingshan was fooled, Wu Lirong was overjoyed and stared at the head intently. The blood on the head of the corpse puppet was not fresh, but it was enough to deceive a secular woman. After seeing Su Li's beautiful but blood-stained face, Wu Lirong immediately laughed crazily. "It's her. It's Su Li. Ha Dongfeng. I will let you live in hell all the time. Don't expect to be relaxed for the rest of your life." Hatred and jealousy intertwined on Wu Lirong's face, which made her look like a devil and a ghost. When Tingshan felt extremely uncomfortable, he quickly grabbed Wu Lirong's neck. Wu Lirong immediately stopped talking, and the ecstasy on her face turned into deep fear. "Senior," when Tingshan gloomily said, "Now, let me go to see Qingning immediately." Wu Lirong covered her neck and struggled violently. Hearing Wen Tingshan's words, she sneered in a low voice, "Break my neck if you can. I won't let you see the woman named Qingning for the rest of your life." She really burned the bridge after crossing it. Wen Tingshan's eyes narrowed, and he didn't feel guilty about violating the agreement. He slapped Wu Lirong unconscious, leaving her shocked. She had clearly laid the groundwork before. She comforted Wen Tingshan by saying that she found Qingning, and then threatened him with the existence of Qingning. Wen Tingshan cared about that woman so much, so he should be cautious. Why did he slap her unconscious without hesitation? Wasn't she afraid that she would kill her? After the darkness, Wu Lirong woke up from a dizzy state. She looked around and found that she was tied up in a stone room with walls on all sides. She suddenly panicked and couldn't help shouting, "Senior! I know I'm wrong. Please let me go. I will take you to the Wu Mansion to find the woman named Ning Qing." Before she finished her words, the door of the stone room opened quietly. Wu Lirong immediately looked over, but when she saw the girl standing behind the door, her joy immediately turned into dullness. Su Yu was still alive. Impossible! You little bitch, you are dead. How could he still be alive? The great anger made Wu Lirong forget his own situation and madly abused. Su Li impatiently picked her nails and slapped Wu Lirong's cheek with one hand. But this slap was fierce and resounding. Wu Lirong turned her head and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her lips wriggled as she spat out several teeth. The sharp pain in her mouth finally woke her up. Her face was full of fear and panic. At this moment, when Tingshan, who had changed into clean clothes, came in from the door. Wu Lirong saw Wen Tingshan, who was like a different person, and finally understood that Wen Tingshan had chosen to surrender to Su Li. The head was fake like hers. But why did this silly girl have the ability to make him surrender? She couldn't help showing resentment in her eyes. Su Li's calm voice sounded softly, "If you dare to show such a look again, believe it or not, I will dig out your eyes first." Wu Lirong's body trembled violently. She looked at Su Li's face with trembling hands, but she saw that Su Li still had a delicate smile on her face. It seemed that gouging out eyeballs was as common as eating and drinking tea, which was not even worthy of Su Li's killing intent. "I heard from my protector Shan that you have found Qingning in the Wu Mansion." Su Li walked lightly and turned behind Wu Lirong. She whispered in her ear, "Can you tell me about the family background of the girl named Qingning? Are her parents still alive? What's her name?" Wu Lirong's scalp was covered with goosebumps. She was flustered, but she didn't dare to show it on her face. She knew that the Ning Qing fabricated by her was probably the last straw for her to survive. But she didn't find her at all. How could she answer Su Li's words? "Speak." Wen Tingshan's face darkened and he roared coldly. Wu Lirong trembled with fear and cried, I'll speak. I'll speak. I was in a hurry to find her. How could I investigate so much? I only know that she is a widow. Su Li's eyes flashed. Where did you find her? Let me think. Wu Lirong's face couldn't stop shaking violently. Many places appeared in her mind. Su Li's question completely baffled her. Damn it, this little bitch was as despicable and shameless as her mother. Seeing that when Tingshan took a step forward, Wu Lirong was so scared that she almost peed her pants. She shouted regardless of anything, "It's in Yunjing City? It's in Yunjing City." When Tingshan hesitated, Wu Lirong's words were indeed full of doubts, but he didn't dare to bet on Ning Qing's life. Su Li smiled faintly. Wu Lirong did have some intelligence, but unfortunately she met Su Li. Well, if you want to live a little longer, I'll let you enjoy it. Su Li said with a smile and winked at Wen Tingshan. They left the adytum. Wu Lirong breathed a sigh of relief. She recovered her mind and asked. There was a smell between her legs. She was so scared that she peed her pants just now. Her face immediately became red, as if she had suffered the harshest humiliation in the world. Little bitch, why didn't you die? When Tingshan followed Su Li back to the attic on the top floor. After hesitating for a moment, he said, Su Li, can you keep her alive for a few more days? Let me investigate this matter, and then, does Ning Qing have a father who is a teacher, Ning Yunji? Su Li suddenly interrupted Wen Tingshan. What she said made him stunned. Why did Su Li seem to know Ning Qing's whereabouts after one day? Was Wu Lirong lying? Or was Su Li lying? Wen Tingshan saw that Su Li's words were more credible at a glance. He was silent for a moment and nodded. When I met Qing in Yunjing City, she did say that her father was a pedantic teacher. As for his name, I don't know. Ning Qing had been to Yunjing. Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly. No wonder when Tingshan came here to find her. Ning Qing had already left Yunjing, a sad place. She smiled slightly and sat down at the table. She picked up the brush and began to paint without saying a word. When Tingshan couldn't help but walk to the side to watch. When he saw that Su Li only drew a rough outline of the facial features, he couldn't help trembling with excitement. Although it was just an outline, the familiarity engraved in his soul made him tremble involuntarily. Su Li's wrist shook quickly, and she painted very fast. Soon, Ning Qing's current appearance was perfectly presented on the rice paper. Looking at the familiar person in the painting, when Tingshan picked up the paper with trembling hands. His eyes, which had never shed tears even when he was seriously injured, were quickly wet. How many years had passed? On the Wanjian mountain, he thought about Ning Qing all the time. He was afraid that Ning Qing had forgotten that he had a new lover. He was full of guilt and would rather she didn't wait for him. No matter how much pain and reason he had let her down after all. How many 20 years did she have before she reached the inborn realm? If he asked her to wait for him, it would be too selfish. Wu Lirong is right about one thing. Ms. Ning Qing has been alone all these years. Like her father, she has become a teacher. If you want to see her, you can go to the Qinghe town in the Qinghe province. She teaches in the Qinghe girls' school. That's all. But I still advise you to wait until you recover. Su Li persuaded him, but when Tingshan didn't respond at all. She shook her head and went downstairs alone. Wu Lirong was useless to Wen Tingshan since she gave the news of Ning Qing. Naturally, she could do whatever she wanted. Bang! The underground adytum was kicked open. Wu Lirong suddenly raised her head and saw Su Li coming alone. She slowly approached and suddenly struggled violently. Su Li, you can't kill me. I was your mother's good sister. How can you kill me? How dare you kill me? Where is that senior? Let him come. I still need him. Su Li closed the door and walked to Wu Lirong. She pulled a chair and sat down. She looked very calm. How did you kill my mother, huh? Wu Lirong's breath stagnated, and her sophistry immediately disappeared. Don't talk? Su Li's eyes sparkled and her eyelashes trembled slightly. She pinched Wu Lirong's thumb with one hand and then crushed it. Ah! A sharp scream immediately resounded through the adytum. Unfortunately, the adytum was built according to Su Li's instructions. Even if Wu Lirong's voice was 10 times louder, it couldn't pass through. Su Li seemed not to hear Wu Lirong's scream. She still smiled and said, "Don't tell me." She took a handkerchief and wiped her bloody fingertips. Then she gently moved the index finger that pinched Wu Lirong's. Fear immediately climbed up Wu Lirong's sweaty face. She screamed without hesitation, "I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Stop pinching." As soon as Wu Lirong said that, Su Li let go of her hand. Wu Lirong didn't want to live at this moment. She just wanted to suffer less. She immediately told Su Li everything she had done in the past. At that time, I happened to know that Su Yun had a biological sister named Su Yun. She came back to Yunjing once a year to visit her. I knew that Su Yun absolutely trusted her sister. On the night before her wedding, I gathered people to kill her. But her sister really came back. That Su Yu was extremely powerful. She blocked all of my subordinates by herself. I could only watch as Su Yun was saved. Later, the reinforcements of the Wu mansion came. Su Yu was seriously injured and fled. I took people to chase her. Unexpectedly, that bitch. Su Li's index finger was crushed. Blood splashed everywhere. Su Li's tone became softer. "Who are you calling a bitch?" Wu Lirong rolled her eyes in pain. It was very difficult for her to scream. She said, "I am a bitch. I am wrong. I am a bitch." Su Li let go of her hand and smiled. "Go on. If you say something wrong again, it will not be as simple as a finger." Wu Lirong trembled. She looked at Su Li with fear in her eyes. Devil. Su Li was a complete devil. She was different from her kind-hearted mother. There was no good or evil in her eyes. I thought that I could catch her immediately if I went out of the city, but I didn't know why I didn't find her. Later, I took people to search all over Yunjing City and all the places outside Yunjing City. My people were mixed in the hands of Lord Rui. No one found that a small group of people wanted to kill your mother. But after searching for a few months, I still found nothing. Chapter 209. So what? Su Li tilted her head, and her eyes were dark. Wu Lirong seemed to see the burning ghost fire in her deep eyes. That was the flame of anger and hatred that wanted to burn her up. Haha, Wu Lirong suddenly laughed maniacally. "Little slut, you're very angry, aren't you? I heard that you were very miserable when you were a child. You didn't feel the slightest family affection. You were adopted by a vicious woman and were beaten all day long." Su Li's smile slowly disappeared. She stood up, but she didn't pinch Wu Lirong's fingers again. She let Wu Lirong continue to talk. "You were miserable, and so was your father. Back then, I tortured your mother to the end. Even when she died, she didn't say a single word about you. I couldn't calm my hatred, so I cut your mother open and threw away all the things in her body. Later, your father's loyal commander picked up your mother's body bit by bit along the path and put them together. You don't know that your father was crazy. He went crazy on the day he saw your mother's body. If Wu Bin didn't keep persuading him to bury Su Yun, your father would have been a complete lunatic now. I hate you. Why didn't I find that you were the bastard left by Su Yun earlier? Dongfang Rui actually found you. I hate you." Wu Lirong screamed crazily, and her hair was disheveled like a devil. Su Li was expressionless. She stepped away and crushed 5 fingers of Wu Lirong's right foot. The hoarse scream sounded again, accompanied by Su Li's cold and calm voice. "Apologize." "Apologize for what?" Crack. Wu Lirong's left toes were all broken. She was in so much pain that she foamed at the mouth and rolled her eyes. But she could still hear the faint voice clearly. "Apologize to my mother, now, immediately." "Bah!" Wu Lirong smiled ferociously and spat at Su Li's face. "Little bitch, even if you crush all my fingers, I won't say a word of apology. Never in this life." "Really?" Su Li grabbed Wu Lirong's right hand with one hand and crushed Wu Lirong's whole palm like a chicken claw. More shrill screams echoed in the adytum, but Wu Lirong still did not apologize. Soon, Wu Lirong's limbs were all hanging limply. She lowered her head and panted heavily. She was actually so stubborn that she didn't even say a word of apology. "Very good." Su Li wiped the blood on her face and smiled brightly. She said, "Mrs. Wu, You really have a good perseverance. However, I like that you can hold on. I haven't had enough fun. Wu Lirong looked up in horror and her pupils contracted. Her limbs were all broken. What else could Su Li do? Then Wu Lirong saw the most unforgettable scene in her life. Su Li raised her palm, and a burst of dense green light flashed. Then the green light automatically dispersed into 4 groups and flew to her limbs. A strange itch came from her limbs, and her limbs recovered after a few breaths. This also meant that she would have to go through the same torturous method again. Perhaps there would be a 3rd time, a 4th time. As long as she didn't relent, there would be 100 times. At that time, could she still bear it? Wu Lirong's face was pale and her lips were trembling. Are you a human or a ghost? What answered her was the explosion of her right thumb. Ah! The familiar screams came from the adytum again and continued, until the next morning. For a whole night, Fong Yuan stood in front of the adytum and listened to the sound inside the door. He didn't dare to open the door to have a look. He could feel the darkness in Su Li's heart was expanding through the door. If he opened the door at this time, it would definitely not be a good result. In the adytum, Su Li gasped slightly. The wood stars were not endless and she also had a limit. But obviously, Wu Lirong couldn't hold on first. Let me die. Please Su Li, I was wrong. I want to apologize to your mother. Wu Lirong looked up and begged weakly. After experiencing too many broken limbs, the string in her mind had already broken. Taking a deep breath, Su Li stood up with a pious expression on her face. Her voice was still clear and melodious. I will say 1 sentence and you will say 1 sentence. I am Wu Lirong. I am Wu Lirong. You killed Su Yun and are unforgivable. You killed Su Yun and are unforgivable. Today, I am willing to die to apologize. Today. Wu Lirong's eyes suddenly changed and she swallowed the second half of the sentence. But Su Li stepped on her kneecap and forced her to say it. Say it. If you don't say it, do you want to continue the previous game? Wu Lirong trembled violently and said with difficulty, Today, I am willing to die to apologize. After death, I am willing to go to hell and suffer 16 kinds of torture to apologize for escaping for 16 years. If there is an afterlife, I should be a chicken or a duck in Su Yun's mouth and a cow or a horse. I will be a beast forever. After that, Wu Lirong stopped. But Su Li crushed the bones of her right arm with 1 palm. Read it. Continue to read it. Read it word by word. I, Wu Lirong, killed Su Yun and are unforgivable. I, Wu Lirong, killed Su Yun and are unforgivable. I, Wu Lirong, killed Su Yun. When Wu Lirong read it for the 7th time, Su Li crushed her throat with 1 hand and finally let her die. The smell of blood was thick in the adytum. Su Li took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Mother, did you hear it? Wu Lirong is apologizing to you. She will atone for the sins of thousands of generations. I will make you happy in this life and then go to heaven to accompany you. In the silent stone room, only Su Li's echo was like a sigh. Early the next morning, Su Li appeared in the sight of Lord Rue's mansion. Lord Rue's mansion didn't want to eat or drink these days. They were so anxious that they almost fell down. As soon as they heard the news of Su Li, they immediately rushed over. Where have you been? Seeing that Su Li's clothes were clean and tidy and her smile was shallow, Dong Fengrui was relieved. He couldn't help rushing up and hugged her tightly. He suppressed his voice and said, I thought you were like your mother and didn't want me anymore. Su Li gently patted Dong Fengrui's back and chuckled, How could it be? Father, I will take good care of you in the future and don't let mother worry. Dong Fengrui's body immediately froze. He heard something. Su Li actually called him father? Dong Fengrui suddenly broke away from Su Li's arms. He held Su Li's shoulders and looked up and down. He was suspicious. Su Li couldn't help but laugh. Dong Fengrui had been cheated so many times that he even learned to use his brain. Did he suspect that she was a fake? I am Su Li, not someone else. Su Li gently pushed away Dong Fengrui's hand and said, Although I admit your identity, I will not become Dong Fengli. My mother didn't marry into the Dongfang family, so I won't. If you can accept it, Come to the affiliated school of the National Academy to find me. Then, Su Li bypassed Dongfang Rui, who was still in a daze. Wu Bin looked at Su Li, who wanted to take care of both sides. Su Li slowly walked away. Before Su Li went far, Dongfang Rui woke up. He quickly turned around and chased Su Li. Li, wait for your father. There is a carriage. Why do you waste your energy? Su Li stopped and looked back with a smile. At that moment, Dongfang Rui's eyes were wet and 2 lines of tears flowed down. His heart was completely melted at this moment. This time, there was no so-called banquet in Lord Rui's mansion. However, Lord Rui went to the National Academy every 2 or 3 days and told everyone he met that Su Li had recognized him. He was so proud, like a child showing off his toys everywhere. Wu Bin, who had been following Lord Rui, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Wu Lirong died. Su Li recognized her master. Her master, who had lived a miserable life for 16 years, finally had a good ending. Of course, they didn't know that the real Wu Lirong went to hell with continuous apologies after being tortured by Su Li for a day and a night. Su Yu, who was still busy in the Zhouyue winery, heard the drinkers talking about Su Li's recent situation. She was stunned at first, and then her eyes became soft. She didn't expect that Su Li would forgive Dongfang Rui so easily. Could she also, seeing his wife's appearance? Xian Jingzhou couldn't help but sigh softly. The knot in his heart had to be untied. But Su Li was not simple. He didn't tell Su Yu about what happened in the Linli building. Su Yu could bear the guilt. So, he would investigate it clearly. On this day, Su Li was studying Wen Tingshan's prescription in the room. It was the first time for her to contact a senior of the longevity realm. While treating his injury, she naturally wanted to test the various functions of the physical body of the longevity realm. Mammy Li's voice suddenly sounded outside the door. Miss, Lord comes to see you. Got it. I'm coming. Su Li put down the prescription and got up to open the door to the front hall of the affiliated school. Mammy Li followed her happily. She was very happy that Miss was willing to recognize Lord Rui. Only she knew Su Li's suffering in these years. Because she knew it, she knew how difficult it was for Su Li to let go of everything in the past and recognize Lord Rui. In the front hall, Dongfang Rui was looking at the empty school. There were many books on the lesson plan that Su Li thanked personally. He picked up a book and opened it. The handwriting was graceful and beautiful. He really liked it. Dad, why are you here again? These days, you come here more often than those playboys in the school. Su Li's teasing voice came. Dongfang Rui looked up and couldn't help but laugh loudly. Why can't I come to see my daughter? If you are willing to live in the Lord Rui's mansion, I don't have to work so hard. Su Li shook her head slightly and said, the affiliated school is entrusted to me by my master. It also contains the intention of my senior fellow apprentice. Dad, I have made up my mind on this matter. You don't need to persuade me. Dongfang Rui shook his head and sighed bitterly. You and your mother are the same. I can't persuade you, so I can only bring people to you. Poor they. Su Li raised her eyebrows and guessed. People of the Yunj sect. Dongfang Rui said with a smile. After today, the Yunj sect will be changed to the Li sect. I originally prepared them for you. Now they are handed over to you. Su Li seemed to feel something and looked out of the door. As expected, she saw acquaintances whom she had fought many times in the previous life approaching slowly. They all knelt down and saluted respectfully. Miss. There were 5 women and 5 men. They were all in their early 20s and had reached the inborn 3rd hurdle. They were opponents in the previous life and subordinates in this life. How mysterious it was. Su Li glanced at their young faces and narrowed her eyes slightly. Get up. In the previous life, when she fought with them for the first time, she killed 3 people in a siege of 10 people. She didn't resent these 10 people. The existence of Su Zipei forced them to oppose her, which was also a tragedy. Dad, you don't have to change the name. Su Li looked back and smiled. I like the name of the Yunj sect very much. Dongfang Rui smiled and nodded. The Yunj sect is already yours. Whatever you say. The 10 people who met their master for the first time felt relieved when they heard this. The Yunj sect was their belief. If it was changed rashly, they would be slightly uncomfortable. It was better that Su Li didn't change the name. It seems that the future master is as kind and easy to get along with as the rumors say. Chapter 210. After handing over the Yunj sect to Su Li, Dongfang Rui seemed to be relieved and smiled more. There were more than 10 people in the Yunj sect. It was a small sect in the martial arts circle with hundreds of people. This time, 1/10 of them came. They were the best elites cultivated by the Yunj sect. They were the pillars of the Yunj sect. The affiliated school was too small for Yun Yi and others to live. After meeting Su Li, they settled in the nearest yard to the affiliated school and secretly protected Su Li. After buying the original residence, Su Yi asked Su Er and others to clean up the house. Then he came to the back door of the yard. The terrain was quite high. Looking at the affiliated school of the National Academy from the back door, he could see the safety of the affiliated school of the National Academy. If someone wanted to climb over the wall secretly, he couldn't escape their eyes. The head is still young. She only learned medical skills from the miracle-working doctor before. Her cultivation is still shallow. If she takes over the affairs of the martial arts circle, it will be a little shameful. Anyway, the Yunj sect finally has a master. Yun Isin let out a deep sigh and her eyes lit up. Just as a country couldn't live without a king, the sect in the martial arts circle would be in a state of disunity if there was no master. It was difficult to survive for a long time. The nature of the Yunj sect was different. It was supported by the Lord Rui's mansion. Yun Yi was just an orphan wandering around in the early years of war. He was selected by the Yunj sect and got rid of the life of fighting for food with wild dogs. Although the practice and training were very hard, he felt very happy as long as he had enough food and a place to sleep. Later, as he slowly grew up, his outstanding performance allowed his status to continue to rise. His heart also became more and more confused. Ever since he was a child, he had looked forward to having a full meal and warm clothes, but now he was suddenly living the life of his dreams. Furthermore, he had mastered martial arts. The rest of his life suddenly became dull and boring. Finally, one year, Lord Rui came and gave him the name of Yun Yi. The words of Lord Rui still echoed in his heart. The master of the Yunj sect is not me. It can only be my long-lost daughter. As long as she doesn't show up, the Yunj sect will continue to look for her. Your mission is to guard her for a lifetime and not let her be hurt. If her order is to kill me, you must absolutely obey. Under the brainwashing of Prince Rui, a group of young boys and girls who lacked faith were given the belief that they could fight for their entire lives. He was 12 years old when he entered the Cloud Pavilion, and now he was 26 years old. The faith he had been instilled in him for 14 years had become indestructible. Today, when Yun Yi saw Su Li, who was 10 years younger than him and was so delicate and pretty like a next-door girl, his desire to protect her became stronger. In this life, I will protect my master's safety. Yun Yi looked at the affiliated school of the National Academy and swore. At this moment, the master that Yun Yi wanted to protect was not in the affiliated school. Instead, he changed into Mr. Li and appeared in the Li building. Because a guest came to the Li building, Su Li waved her hand, and the wine glass flew over the space and fell on the table. This time, Ling Qinglan did not dodge in panic, but smiled slightly and nodded to thank her. Lord Ling is very busy. Why do you have the time to drink here? Hearing Su Li's gentle words as usual, Ling Qinglan smiled bitterly and said, Mr. Li, you must be joking. This time, I am not looking for you, but our hierarch. I come here to send an invitation. Child Li. Su Li smiled lightly and said, Your child is not an idle person. This time, he suddenly invited me. Ling Qinglan's eyes flashed. He held his fists and said, Mr. Li, you are my savior. I should not hide something from you, so I will be frank. On that rainy night in the Wu family, did you do something behind the scenes? Su Li raised her eyebrows and slowly held the wine glass in her hand. Why do you think it was me? Ling Qinglan shook his head and smiled. Hierarch thinks that only you can weaken 80% of the outside forces in the capital secretly without doing anything to us. On that day, the Yinma cult also took action. But before they played a role, everything was over. Su Li's action took the initiative, so that the Inma cult could not do anything this time. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. So, Ling Li prepared to thank her, so he held a banquet? She faintly felt that there was another purpose in this matter. Ling Li's temper could not be so simple. However, she now had Wen Tingshan by her side. She was not afraid of being exposed as Mr. Li. She still had to go to this banquet. Thinking of this, Su Li cupped her hands and smiled lightly. Since Hierarch invites me, how can I not go? Ling Qinglan smiled and took out the invitation and put it on the side of the table. Then, I will wait for Mr. Li. Then Ling Qinglan was about to leave. His only purpose this time was to invite Ms. Li. The reason why he came to send the invitation in person was to show that he attached importance to Ms. Li. If he sent a random person to send the invitation, he was afraid that Ms. Li would be annoyed. By the way, Lord Ling, please wait. Su Li took the invitation and suddenly remembered something. She stopped Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan turned his head in confusion and saw Su Li squinting her eyes. She asked softly, I heard that Lord Ling has been investigating the unsolved case of the Yi family, right? Ling Qinglan was slightly shocked. After hesitating for a moment, he nodded gently and said, I have some connections with the Yi family. Although he didn't say EMO, he knew that Mr. Li was smart and could definitely guess something. Mr. Li already knew many of his secrets, so it didn't make any difference. Moreover, his investigation was not a secret. Although he had many unsolved cases to cover up the real purpose of investigating the unsolved case of the Yi family, it was easy for people like Su Li to see the difference. Seeing that Ling Qinglan told her frankly, Su Li smiled slightly. I was going to tell you about it a few days ago, but a lot of things happened, so I put it off. Since you are here today, I will tell you. Su Li crooked her fingers, and a scroll automatically flew out from the bookshelf behind her and fell into Ling Qinglan's hands. Ling Qinglan lowered his head and stroked the scented scroll with his fingers. His heart was beating wildly. Had Mr. Li found out who the real murderer of the Yi family was? It was impossible. He didn't get the result for so many years. No matter how powerful Mr. Li was, he was only born 14 years ago. How could he know too much? He forced himself to calm down, open the file, and read it. His face immediately became incomparably cold and solemn. What was written on the scroll was exactly what Chen Gong said to Xian Jingzhou when he came over. He knew nothing about all kinds of strange things at that time. Sure enough, it was blocked. A cold light flashed in Ling Qinglan's eyes. His relationship with Chen Gong was not close before, and there was a grudge left by the vicious competition between the Supreme Judiciary and the Ministry of Penalty. But this time, even if Chen Gong didn't like him, he would visit him in person. Ling Qinglan, there was something strange about the matter at that time. Someone deliberately didn't allow you to unite with Chen Gong. If you want to take action, you should be careful. Don't lose your calm. Su Li's cold voice suddenly sounded. Ling Qinglan came to his sense. He stood up and bowed respectfully. I understand. Mr. Li, you helped me so much and I can't repay you. If one day I can find the real murderer and kill the enemy, I will definitely come to have a drink and talk with you. It's a deal. Goodbye. Ling Qinglan cupped his hands and turned around. When he was about to leave, Wen Tingshan came into the room from outside. This person was so strange, Ling Qinglan was confused. He and Ling Li still knew nothing about the origin of the Lin Li building. The Inma cult only found another Lin Li building in the Qinghe town after several investigations. No one knew where the seniors of the Lin Li building came from and how many arrangements there were. Everyone seemed to appear out of thin air and didn't exist in this world. But everyone who appeared so far could be called a genius, because they were not only young but also practiced incredibly fast. Now, Ling Qinglan suddenly saw an old man of the Lin Li building. He was naturally curious, and then he looked at him a few more times, when Tingshan frowned slightly and turned to see Ling Qinglan's face. So, Ling Qinglan of the Supreme Judiciary? The lackey of the Dongfang family. Chapter 211. Protector Shan, he is not an enemy. Hearing Su Li's voice, Wen Tingshan withdrew his momentum and looked slightly stiff. He showed an apologetic expression and said with a fist and palm salute, "I'm sorry. I'm not used to being stared at." Ling Qinglong quickly returned the salute and said, never mind. It's my fault." But in his heart, he was aghast. This person's imposing aura was really terrifying. His cultivation had already reached the 5th level of the congenital realm after he had recovered from his serious injuries. But under the oppression of this person, he actually felt a deep despair, as if as long as this person attacked, he would absolutely be unable to survive. He had never felt this kind of feeling from Ling Li. Ling Li was already at the peak of the inborn realm. Then this person, Ling Qinglong's pupils shrank slightly. Longevity realm. The background of the Lin Li building was more terrible than he had imagined. After Ling Qinglong left, Su Li smiled helplessly. This scene was not arranged by her. It was purely a coincidence. She was not going to accept the gratitude of the Yinma cult. She would not gain anything if she rashly shocked Ling Qinglong. "Protector Shan, why are you here?" Wen Tingshan was still confused about Ling Qinglong's identity. He couldn't help but say, "Is he Ling Qinglong, the officer of the Supreme Judiciary?" Su Li nodded gently, and Wen Tingshan's face immediately became gloomy. The Dongfang family is not easy to deal with. They had a relationship with the Wanjian sect in the early years. "If they recognize me, I'm afraid." Su Li's expression changed slightly. It was the first time for her to hear that the Dehan dynasty was related to the Wanjian sect. If Wen Tingshan didn't mention it today, she would suffer a lot in the future. Could it be that my husband failed in my previous life because of the 10,000 Swords Pavilion? Su Li's expression became a little uncertain, which immediately made Wen Tingshan misunderstand. His eyes flashed with killing intent, and he suggested aloud, "Why don't I catch up with her now, in case of accidents?" Su Li came back to her senses and explained, "Don't worry. Even if he recognizes you, he won't tell others. If Ling Qinglong is in the Supreme Judiciary, it will not belong to the Dongfang family." Wen Tingshan was stunned. After thinking about it, he finally understood what Su Li meant. It turned out that Ling Qinglong was not loyal to the Dongfang family. "By the way, you still haven't told me why you're here today. According to my arrangements, you should still be resting in bed right now." "What, you can't bear it anymore?" When Tingshan looked ashamed, "I'm afraid that the medicine you gave me these days will be wasted." Su Li raised her eyebrows and realized that when Tingshan was implying something. She suddenly said, "Are you going to the Qinghe girls' school?" When Tingshan nodded silently. Su Li shook her head with disappointment in her eyes. "I understand your feelings very well. You can't wait to stand in front of Ning Qing in the next moment and tell him everything that has happened over the years. But have you ever thought about where the people of the 10,000 Swords Pavilion are now?" When Tingshan's expression changed slightly. He frowned and said, "After I returned to the sect, I didn't suggest Qing. I even set up a camouflage near Tianji country. They should still be wandering there. But it won't be long before they find Dehan country. If the Dongfang family joins hands with them, then that's why you can't look for her now." Su Li interrupted Wen Tingshan and said coldly, "It's a long way to the Qinghe province. Even if you don't stop for a moment, it will take at least 7 days. In addition, you are seriously injured, and your fighting power is almost zero. If you meet the people of the 10,000 Swords Pavilion at that time, do you think they can protect Ningqing?" What Su Li said flashed in Wen Tingshan's mind. The anxiety on his face changed for a few seconds, and finally turned into helplessness and bitterness. "You are right. I can't go to her now, or I will only put her in danger and hurt her in vain." But he really missed her so much that his reason was almost beyond his control. His whole body was almost out of control. "Bear it." Su Li was expressionless and said lightly, "Ning Qing has been waiting for so many years. She doesn't care about waiting for 2 more months. If you go like this, you will be separated from her forever. It's better not to go." When Tingshan took a deep breath. Whenever he thought of the words, 10,000 Swords Pavilion, his heart seemed to be pressed by a huge mountain. He said, "How will you deal with the people of the 10,000 Swords Pavilion?" It depends on how much you know about the pursuers. Su Li smiled at this moment and said, "Take good care of yourself. Otherwise, you can't even deal with a pursuer." Wen Tingshan's eyes were firm. Finally, he completely obeyed Su Li. As time went by, it was the day when Su Li kept the appointment. From the east gate of Yunjing City, after walking for dozens of miles, you could see a lake with a very wide view. Because it looked like a bow, it was named Sky Bow Lake. It was very cold on the lake in winter. It was really unwise to go boating on the lake. But at this moment, there was indeed a ship with several decks drifting gently on the lake. In the warm room of the ship, Su Li and Ling Li, who wore a jade bone mask, were sitting face to face. There was a small tea table in the middle. Ling Imo stood straight outside the warm room and let the cold wind blow his face. Around the ship, there were people of Shalu cult. After a cup of tea, Ling Li lifted the teapot and added a cup of tea for Su Li. His clear and melodious laughter sounded on the lake. "Mr. Li, you are really brave. You come to drink tea with me alone. Aren't you afraid that I won't have a good feast?" Su Li smiled slightly and replied lightly, "Since I am here, I will take it easy. Child Ling Li, why don't you take off your mask and tell me why you call me out this time?" Ling Li chuckled and gently took off his mask. His face was as young as Su Li's. He looked calm, but his heart was not as calm as it seemed. He wore a mask because his disguise skill had not reached the peak. Warriors of the inborn realm could still see the clues. But this person couldn't even see whether he disguised himself or not. Did he really show his true face? "What are you thinking about, hierarch?" Su Li took a sip of tea, but she was confused. She could see from the subtle changes in his expression that Ling Li seemed to have a trace of hostility to her identity. Where did this hostility come from? Ling Li was revealed to be absent-minded. He disguised a smile and shook his head. "Nothing. Today, I invite Mr. Li to come here to thank you for helping Qinghu cure the Li Jue pill. I also have a question." Ling Li didn't ask about the rainy night in the Wu family. He got the answer from Ling Qinglan. It would be troublesome to ask again. Su Li secretly thought that as expected. She put down the cup and nodded. "I'd like to hear the details." Ling Li slightly pursed his lips, and there was a hint of tension in his starry eyes at this moment. He asked, "What is the relationship between you and Su Li?" Su Li's expression was slightly stagnant. What was this? Her identity was seen through so quickly? Not yet. Su Li suddenly realized what Ling Li's hostility was. Her mind immediately became complicated. Seeing that Su Li was silent, Ling Li's heart sank slightly, but he remained calm on the surface. He continued to ask, "Why are you hesitating? This question shouldn't be too difficult. You are definitely not the relationship I imagined, right?" Ling Li's palms between his knees slowly clenched into fists. When his patience was about to run out again, Su Li finally raised her head and smiled carelessly. "What is the relationship between me and Su Li? What does it have to do with Child Ling?" Ling Li was tense for a moment, and then he forced himself to relax and continued to respond, "Nothing else. I was saved by Miss Su in those years, and I dare not forget her kindness. You and Su Li are from the same hometown, but why didn't she mention it when I was recuperating in Miss Su's place? I feel strange, so I asked this question." Su Li's smile faded a little. At that time, the Lin Li building had not been built yet, and there was no Mr. Li. But obviously, she couldn't explain it to Ling Li. "She mentioned you to me, but since she didn't mention me in front of you, she must think that saving you is just a trivial thing, just like saving a cat or dog on the street. It is not worth mentioning, and she will not meet you in the future." Hearing the faint words, Ling Li's eyes immediately became slightly cold. "Mr. Li? Are you provoking me?" The atmosphere in the pavilion instantly became hostile, as if there was a snowstorm blowing and the warmth was gone. Chapter 212. Ling Li emitted a frightening momentum. His sharp face was full of coldness. He looked at Su Li quietly as if he was looking at a dead person. Now, he was very angry. Although he didn't understand why, it didn't prevent him from fighting against Mr. Li in front of him. There was a voice in his heart that if Mr. Li didn't fight against him, he might have one less obstacle. Ling Mo stood in the wind and snow and noticed the atmosphere in the warm room. A trace of worry flashed in his cold eyes. No matter what Master did, he would support him unconditionally. But if Master really fought against Mr. Li, the consequences? Time passed by for a few breaths, but it seemed that several centuries had passed. As Ling Li took a deep breath and sat down again, the atmosphere in the room returned to ease. He finally gave up the impulse in his heart. With more burdens, he had to consider more. He was no longer the mercenary who always acted alone and had unparalleled spirit before the time travel. He was Ling Li who controlled the future of the Ling family and the fate of the Yinma cult. Su Li closed the half-opened jade bottle between her knees and sighed in her heart. It was the best not to fight against them. The Lin Li building absolutely supported the Yinma cult, but it couldn't be a part of it. She had to keep this in any case. If her identity was exposed, everything she had done would be in vain. Sorry, Ling Li. Su Li smiled slightly and apologized. My analogy may be inappropriate. If it annoys you, I apologize in advance. Ling Li was slightly shocked. Why did this person's attitude suddenly become less hostile? Sect Master Ling invited me here because you're afraid that my winery will affect your sect. Please don't worry about this, Sect Master. As Miss Su Li said, since I took her recipe, I will manage it well and let people in the world drink good wine. The Lin Li building has no ambition and will not get involved in the Dahan country. I will make it clear here. Please rest assured, Hierarchling. Then, Su Li smiled and drank up the cold wine in the cup in one gulp, without any hesitation. But this explanation made Ling Li more doubtful. Since the Lin Li building had no other demand, why did it take action? All the people in the world came for benefits, and all the people in the world went away for benefits. What did Mr. Li want? After that, the two had nothing to say and kept quiet. They drank a cup of wine and had their own thoughts. When the time came, the banquet finally ended on a bad note. Su Li thanked him. She tiptoed on the surface of the lake and floated away, leaving Ling Li who was full of worries. After he came to this world, with the modern knowledge he brought, he built up a strong and mysterious force like steel in less than 10 years. He thought that there were not many things in the world that could baffle him. But since Su Li appeared, there were more and more things he didn't understand. Master, it's late. Let's go back first, or we will be found by Madam. Ling Xian came out from the back of the ship and whispered to Ling Li. Ling Li responded and glanced at Ling Mo without a trace. Ling Mo was expressionless and had no reaction. Ling Mo was expressionless and didn't respond. Ling Mo didn't dare to say it in front of Ling Xian, which meant that Ling Xian had done other unspeakable things in addition to the affairs of the cult. After thinking for a moment, Ling Li ordered to go back. He didn't ask Ling Xian whether he should wait for her to confess or wait for him to find out everything and then ask. He needed to think about it carefully. At this moment, a rather strange scene appeared in the Lin Li building. In the middle of the underground addendum, Xian Jingzhou was tied up tightly and looked depressed. Fang Yuan, Chu Qingning, Yin Xuetong and Fang Mu stood in the room and looked at each other. Then they turned their eyes to Wen Tingshan at the same time. Wen Tingshan was puzzled and said in a deep voice, "Why are you looking at me?" Chu Qingning touched his panda eyes and pushed Wen Tingshan out of the door. "Come on, Protector Shan. Let's go out and talk." Wen Tingshan was pushed out of the addendum helplessly, and the other 4 people also came out. Except for Fang Yuan, the others all laughed, which made Wen Tingshan more depressed. He argued, this person spies on the Lin Li building for no reason. He must have bad intentions. I caught him and left him for Su Li to interrogate. What's wrong? 2 hours ago, Xian Jingzhou had been secretly inquiring about the news since he saw Su Li come into the Lin Li building that night. But no matter which intelligence force, they knew nothing about the relationship between the Lin Li building and Su Li. Some people even thought that he was unreasonable and drove him out. In desperation, Xian Jingzhou could only sneak into the Lin Li building alone to explore. Unfortunately, he happened to enter the room used by Wen Tingshan for healing. Wen Tingshan's spiritual mind was so sharp that he noticed it the moment Xian Jingzhou appeared. Poor Xian Jingzhou was in the inborn 8th hurdle. Under Wen Tingshan's surprise attack, Xian Jingzhou was knocked unconscious and fell to the ground. Then there was the scene in the addendum. The four people who knew the relationship between Xian Jingzhou and Su Li felt strange. Now, even if Su Li didn't want to contact Xian Jingzhou and Su Yu for the time being, she couldn't. Half an hour later, the sky was already pitch black. Su Li came to the Linli building. After listening to Wen Tingshan's narration, she suddenly fell into silence. After a long time, she changed into a cyan robe and changed into the appearance of Mr. Li. Then she came to the underground addendum. Squeak, the low and hoarse sound of the door opening was extremely harsh in Xian Jingzhou's ears. He suddenly raised his head, and his eyes lit up. When he saw Su Li's strange face, he was stunned. This was a face that he had never seen before. He hesitated and said a word, "You, Mr. Li." Su Li was expressionless and looked at him. At this moment, Xian Jingzhou was no longer a pedantic scholar with the atmosphere of a marketplace. Instead, he exuded the great righteousness of a decent person who practiced the authentic mental method of Xiangong. This was the real Xian Jingzhou. "Are you Mr. Li?" Xian Jingzhou couldn't help but exclaim. Nowadays, there were many mysterious rumors about Mr. Li in major intelligence forces. Although he was not as famous as the equally mysterious and powerful Child Li, the name Mr. Li was also well known in Yunjing City. The reason why the name was famous was not that what the Wu family did on a rainy night was known. Otherwise, the Linli building would have been destroyed more than 18 times. What really made Mr. Li revered was his unpredictable medical skills. The elixir that Ling Qinglan took was the frightening Li Jue pill. But after such a long time, he was still alive and kicking. How could it not make people of the Lianshi cult shocked? The Li Jue pill was related to the foundation of the Lianshi cult. After many investigations, they finally found the name of Mr. Li, but they still didn't know which force he belonged to, what he looked like, and whether he was a man or a woman. It was a family scandal for the Lianshi cult, and it couldn't be spread out. However, there were a few spies in every sect, so the reputation of Mr. Li spread out. It became more and more exaggerated with the word of mouth of people in the martial arts circle. Some people even said that Mr. Li was an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years. He was obsessed with medical skills so he could cure the Li Jue pill. No one in the world could compare with him. Even Qi Xianqing was not as good as him. Under the influence of such rumors, Xian Jingzhou suddenly saw that Mr. Li was a teenager. How could he not exclaim, "It turns out that you are the owner of the Linli building. I should have thought of it." Xian Jingzhou calmed down and shook his head. He smiled bitterly and said, "According to the rules of the martial arts circle, I admit defeat if I am not as good as others. It's up to you to punish me." Su Li smiled indifferently and said, "Xian Jingzhou, to tell you the truth, I have been paying attention to you and your wife." Su Li's first sentence made Xian Jingzhou's bitter smile become cold. "What do you want to do? Do you remember the pot of wine that you and your wife drank on the first day of the opening of the Linli building?" Xian Jingzhou's expression was tense, and he felt that something was wrong. What happened to the pot of wine? Su Li chuckled and said, "Don't worry. The pot of wine is not poisoned. Otherwise, how can you and your wife be fine after so many days? But for you who are on the path of practicing the mortal world, whether it is poisoned or not, is there any difference?" When Su Li said the last sentence, Xian Jingzhou's face finally changed. This person knew everything. Chapter 213. Su Li paced and said with a light smile, "People of the secular world can't be disturbed on the way to practice mind. A drop of water should be repaid with a spring. So, I exchanged the 2 pots of wine for your loyalty to the Linli building. Is it too much?" Xian Jingzhou was livid and growled, "Despicable! You are not a gentleman to do this." "Despicable?" Su Li raised her eyebrows and said, "When did I say that I am a gentleman? Besides, what I did was an overt scheme at most. You drank the 2 pots of wine willingly. I didn't force you. How is it despicable?" Xian Jingzhou was angry for a while. Su Li clapped her hands. Fang Yuan, who was guarding outside the door, immediately opened the door and said, "Go and invite Su Yu. Tell her that Xian Jingzhou is a guest here and can't afford to pay for the wine." Fang Yuan glanced at Xian Jingzhou, who was anxious and angry. He nodded and left. "Stupid woman, don't come." Xian Jingzhou's heart seemed to be pressed by a stone, which was very heavy. They were schemed against and forced to join a force. They were not willing to be controlled by others. But now he was here. According to Su Yu's character, she had to come. Sure enough, not long after Fang Yuan went out, Su Yu went into the Linli building with a kitchen knife. When she saw that the wine tables in the lobby of the Linli building were as neat as a mirror, and when she saw Fang Yuan standing at the entrance of the underground addendum and guiding her to go down, she finally realized that something was wrong. Su Yu's boorish face could not hide her exquisite thoughts. Her thick eyebrows twitched as she asked, "Little brother, what exactly did my master do? Just tell me, I'm listening." Fang Yuan looked as gentle as possible and whispered, "Proprietress, you will know when you go down. My master is waiting for you downstairs." Su Yu looked slightly serious. She hesitated for a moment and finally followed Fang Yuan down the stairs. There was an underground addendum in the Linli building. The secret of the Zhouyue winery. Su Yu quietly turned the kitchen knife in her hand and pointed it at Fang Yuan, who showed his back to her. But at this moment, Fang Yuan stopped and turned his head and smiled. "Proprietress, this way please." Su Yu was not embarrassed at all. She naturally put away the kitchen knife and pushed the door pointed by Fang Yuan. Creak! Su Yu slowly opened the door. As soon as she saw the scene in the room, she immediately moved from stillness to extreme. Without saying a word, she lifted the kitchen knife and flashed to stab Su Li's neck. Fang Yuan's complexion changed greatly, but it was too late to stop it. Su Li's pupils shrank in an instant, and her body seemed to turn into a boneless snake. She avoided Su Yu's fatal blow, but she also retreated from Xian Jingzhou. Su Yu was happy when she saw this. She didn't want to kill Xian Jingzhou. After she forced Su Li to retreat, she immediately cut the rope that bound Xian Jingzhou. Success! Lady Boss is really an impatient person. If there's anything, why don't we sit down and talk? Why do we have to resort to violence? Su Li chuckled without any sense of exasperation. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. She finally knew why Su Li was so calm. It was because even if the rope was loosened, Xian Jingzhou was still motionless. Jingzhou? Su Yu was confused. Xian Jingzhou patted the rope on his body and stood up with a wry smile. We have been tricked." Su Yu's face changed slightly. She had long felt that something was wrong. Was it intentional that the Linli building invited them to drink last time? Su Li patted the cyan robe that was cut by the wind of the knife. She laughed at the right time and said, "Why do you make such a bitter face? If you join the Linli building, there will only be benefits and no harm." Su Yu snorted and put the kitchen knife in her waist pocket. She said, "Those in power like sweet words most. Do you think that I will believe whatever you say? If you are sensible, let us go. The money for the 2 pots of wine. Give us time, and we will pay it back 100 times. Xian Jingzhou sighed at the moment. He could see the situation better than Su Yu. This person had planned for a long time, and he came to the Linli building. How could he let them go easily? "Mr. Li, I just want to ask, what is the relationship between Su Li and you, and the Linli building?" As soon as Xian Jingzhou said this, Su Yu's cold face immediately turned into astonishment. This young man was Mr. Li? Su Li actually had a relationship with the Linli building? Su Li raised her eyebrows and asked in a deep voice, "Where did you know the relationship between Su Li and me?" Su Li's answer was equivalent to a disguised acquiescence of the relationship. Xian Jingzhou breathed a sigh of relief and accepted his fate. He said, "A few days ago at night, I saw you and a beggar entering this restaurant, so otherwise, how could I easily take risks when I knew that the Linli building was weird?" Su Yu listened and became more silent. She was angry in her heart. Xian Jingzhou had been hiding these words from her. I see. The scene of that day flashed in Su Li's mind. On that day, when Tingshan suddenly attacked her, her state of mind was indeed a little chaotic. She didn't find that someone was spying on her. Fortunately, It was only Xian Jingzhou and his wife who knew it. If it was someone else, Su Li narrowed her eyes and said, Su Li and I do have some relationship, including the wine of the Linli building. Half of the industry income of the Linli building belongs to her. That was friends? The thought flashed in Su Yu's mind. Her resistance to the Linli building was not so serious, but she still had doubts in her heart and did not dare to join rashly. After joining the Linli building, I will not interfere with your life. If it is not necessary, you are still the proprietress of the Zhouyue winery. Only when it is necessary, I will ask you to help. There is no danger to your life. And you can enjoy the wine of the Linli building. It doesn't charge you. Su Li smiled slightly and added another bargaining chip. Xian Jingzhou was so tempted that he almost agreed. Fortunately, Su Yu stopped him in time. At this moment, another person pushed the door and came in without saying hello. Su Li looked back helplessly. She knew it was Wen Tingshan. This person was obviously used to be free in the Wanjian sect. He didn't respect her, the temporary leader, at all. Mr. Li, Wen Tingshan almost spilled the beans and broke into a cold sweat. At this time, he just heard the reason from Chu Qingning and felt a little guilty. After all, Xian Jingzhou was Su Li's uncle, and he didn't show any mercy at that time. Why you here? Go back and lie down. Do you really think my medicine doesn't cost money? Su Li scolded him coldly. Wen Tingshan smiled apologetically and stepped back. I'll go back now. This was the second time that he acted without authorization. It was normal for Su Li to be angry. Su Yu stared at Wen Tingshan's face and blinked, as if she saw something incredible. Just as Wen Tingshan was about to step out, she asked in surprise, Senior fellow apprentice? What? Wen Tingshan trembled violently and looked back incredulously. When he saw Su Yu's face, he frowned and was vigilant. Who are you? Then he winked at Su Li, indicating that she shouldn't let this woman go. If his identity was known, the Linli building would be in big trouble. Su Li didn't move, but raised her eyebrows slightly. Her aunt seemed to know Wen Tingshan. What was going on? You are really senior fellow apprentice Wen. Su Yu saw Wen Tingshan's familiar frown. Even though it had been 8 years, she still recognized him at a glance. He was undoubtedly the first senior fellow apprentice. She immediately changed her fat face and revealed a beautiful face that was somewhat similar to Su Yun's. Senior fellow apprentice, I am Su Yu. Junior sister apprentice Su Yu? Wen Tingshan's voice immediately rose. He turned back a few steps and grabbed Su Yu's shoulder. He said excitedly, You are still alive. I always thought you had died outside. Fortunately. Senior fellow apprentice, it's so nice to see you. Su Yu cried with joy. She completely ignored Xian Jingzhou's strange gaze and threw herself into Wen Tingshan's arms. The appearance of Wen Tingshan immediately eased the relationship between Su Yu and her husband and the Linli building. In addition, Su Yu joined the Linli building without asking Xian Jingzhou's opinion. Obviously, Su Yu trusted Wen Tingshan very much. Since Wen Tingshan was willing to join the force, there would be no problem. But she didn't know that Wen Tingshan was also driven into a corner by Su Li's bewitching potion and was quickly pulled into the group. Su Li rubbed her eyebrows. Su Yu was also a member of the Wanjian sect. The reason seemed to be traced back to a long time ago. Chapter 214. What happened next was much simpler. Under Su Li's deterrence, Wen Tingshan lay back obediently. Su Yu obviously had a lot of words to say to him. After sending Xian Jingzhou away to drink alone, she ran into Wen Tingshan's room. Su Li didn't listen to the secrets of the Wanjian sect. She didn't have so much time to waste here. If she left for a long time, the affiliated school might have problems. Since she and Wen Tingshan decided to join hands to deal with the Wanjian sect, Wen Tingshan would tell her frankly when she came back. After Su Li left, Xian Jingzhou drank several jars of Liehua spirits excitedly and fell asleep. The whole Linli building was quiet. Only Wen Tingshan's room was still bright. Senior fellow apprentice, why did you go down the mountain? Have the rules of the sect been changed in these years? Su Yu asked cautiously. She also went down the mountain without permission, and she went down the mountain more than 10 years earlier than Wen Tingshan. If Wen Tingshan hadn't changed his appearance for a long time and was the closest senior fellow apprentice in her heart, she wouldn't have recognized him rashly and caused the Wanjian sect to continue to chase after her. Wen Tingshan shook his head. Are you still worried about the law enforcers of the Wanjian sect? Don't worry, because Su Yu was slightly happy, but Wen Tingshan smiled bitterly. The person they are chasing now is me. What? Su Yu stood up in shock and asked repeatedly, Senior fellow apprentice, you are the first senior fellow apprentice of the Wanjian sect and the future head of the Wanjian sect. Why are you like this? And you are so seriously injured. What happened? Wen Tingshan's eyes were slightly gloomy. Since the token of the head of the Wanjian sect was lost, the Wanjian sect hasn't had it for decades. When you left, the Wanjian sect was in chaos. Su Yu was silent when she heard the words. She thought of various things in the Wanjian sect. The former head of the Wanjian sect died outside. Although Wen Tingshan was the first disciple and entered the longevity realm, he was stopped by the first elder and others many times because he didn't have the token of the head of the Wanjian sect. That was what she saw before she left the sect. Later, the Wanjian sect went down the mountain to visit relatives every year. She came to Yunjing City to experience the disaster. She was seriously injured and missed the time to go back. She was regarded as a traitor who left the sect and could not go back. The great elder doesn't have much lifespan left. He's very anxious for his son to become the successor of the 10,000 Swords Pavilion. Wen Tingshan's eyes seemed to be blowing over the cold snow. He said, I thought that he would repent, but he sent away the second elder and the third elder, and united with other elders who supported him to attack me. Speaking of this, Wen Tingshan stroked Su Yu's forehead and smiled as gently as before. Don't worry. It won't be chaotic for too long. When the second elder and others come back, it will be settled. Before that, as long as I can solve the pursuers, everything can be solved. Mr. Li's medical skills are superb. My injury will recover in less than half a month. That's good. Su Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and suddenly took out an item. She smiled and said, Senior brother, look, what is this? There was a small cyan sword in Su Yu's hand. It was not made of jade or bronze. Wen Tingshan's pupils shrank when he saw it. He picked up the small sword in Su Yu's hand and looked at it carefully. The small sword was only the size of a thumb, but it was much heavier than an ordinary long sword. Wen Tingshan held his breath and exerted his strength on the small sword. In an instant, a black light that was darker than the night flashed from the sword. The stars were twinkling, like an endless starry sky. Wen Tingshan was excited. Yes, it is the token of the head of the Wanjian sect made of cyan stone. Why do you have it? Su Yu smiled embarrassedly and her cheeks were slightly red. After I was seriously injured, my husband saved me. Later, I found that he also learned the swordsmanship of the Wanjian sect. Later, he took out this token, and I knew that he was the descendant of the head of the Wanjian sect. Jingzhou never wanted to be the head of the Wanjian sect, so he gave it to me. I also thought about going back to the Wanjian sect to give it to my senior fellow apprentice. But the road ahead was dangerous and I had something on my mind. Finally, it was delayed. So, Xian Jingzhou is the junior fellow apprentice. Wen Tingshan smiled. The last head of the Wanjian sect was surnamed Xian. It was so long ago that he almost forgot it. Senior fellow apprentice, Xian Jingzhou is a little reckless, but he is kind and reliable. He is worthy of a lifetime. Su Yu was 40 years old, but she looked only about 20 years old with the support of the inborn realm. Her face was red and beautiful. She said, Senior fellow apprentice, so many years have passed. Is it time to find a sister-in-law? It was true that she had some admiration for Wen Tingshan at that time. But with the great changes and several twists and turns, the memories of the early years in the Wanjian sect had become the beautiful memories of youth. Eldest senior fellow apprentice had entered the longevity realm. Although he looked only in his early 30s, he was actually 50 years old. If he was alone, it would be too pitiful. When Tingshan put away the token, narrowed his eyes, and smiled more softly. he said softly, "You have a sister-in-law. When I recover, I will bring her to see you." "That's great." Senior fellow apprentice also found someone he likes. The sky was about to turn bright. They hadn't seen each other for more than 10 years and talked all night. Many knots in their hearts were untied and they were suddenly enlightened. After dawn, Su Li woke up from meditation and practiced all night. With the support of the medicinal materials of the Lord Rue's mansion, she refined many new auxiliary medicines. But now her cultivation was extremely close to the peak of the previous life. There were not many effective auxiliary medicines. Most of the prescriptions needed living people as the guiding drug, which was against the harmony of heaven and earth. So, she abandoned them in this life. The longevity realm. Su Li's curly eyelashes trembled slightly after the genuine energy went through a big circle. She opened a pair of starry eyes, which were full of brilliance. That was the realm that she didn't really step into in the previous life. It was said that only in the spiritual circle could she have the opportunity to step into the longevity realm. The martial arts circle and the secular world lacked the necessary factors. No matter how outstanding her talent was, it was impossible to break the barrier. If she reached the limit of the inborn realm again, she could go to the Wanjian sect with the help of Wen Tingshan. Su Li opened the door of the adytum and walked out. This thought lingered in her mind for a long time. After all, this world was a world of strength. It was said that there was a higher realm above the longevity realm. Those people were called immortals. Some of them were even powerful enough to destroy a country alone. They could fill the sea and build mountains at will. They could turn the world upside down. In such a deformed world, if she was strong enough, there was no need to build any force. She could help Ling Li destroy his enemies and even his country alone. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes and plots were useless. Unfortunately, she didn't have absolute strength. She was even on the weaker side. Therefore, she could only rely on her little tricks and seek unorthodox ways to win with difficulty. "Miss Butler Wu is here." After washing, Mammy Li came in and whispered. Su Li put down the towel. "People of the Yunj sect were sent here a few days ago. Why did Wu Bin come here today?" Su Li was puzzled. She changed into her usual gauze skirt and came to the front room. When Wu Bin saw Su Li, he immediately bowed and saluted. "Miss, greetings to you." Su Li dodged and asked, "Butler Wu, get up quickly. Why do you come here today?" Wu Bin didn't notice Su Li's little movement. He raised his head and looked complicated. He said slowly, "Miss, today is the day of Zhu Yan's exile. Master asked me to ask you if you want to see it?" Su Li raised her eyebrows. Time flew so fast. Zhu Yan and Su Zipei joined hands to deceive the Lord. This was an absolute felony. The Supreme Judiciary convicted Zhu Yan according to the laws of the Dehan dynasty. Zhu Yan was the mastermind. She would be sent to the frontier to build a city tower. She would either die of exhaustion or be crushed to death mercilessly in the war. Su Zipei believed Zhu Yan's slander and was greedy. She wanted to get involved in the royal power. She should have been sent to the frontier with Zhu Yan. Because of her young age, her punishment was reduced. So, she was demoted to a slave and became a slave forever. Su Li still remembered that Su Zipei's dream was to be a high and mighty miss of a rich and powerful family. Now, after several years of efforts, the result was the opposite. It was so ironic. Chapter 215. Under the protection of Wu Bin, Su Li came to the Zhongtan Street in Yunjing City. At this moment, the line of prisoners exiled from the prison of the Supreme Judiciary was very long. Both sides of the street were surrounded by people who came to watch. When Wu Bin and others arrived, they were dressed in luxurious clothes. People immediately made way for them. Such a movement attracted the attention of many prisoners. Among them, there was Zhu Yan, who still had a trace of fantasy. She didn't believe that Su Li, who always cared about her and indulged her, would not take any remedial measures this time. As long as she was willing to ask, Lord Rui would definitely agree to set her free. When she turned her head and saw Wu Bin's pale face, she subconsciously showed fear. But then she saw Su Li beside Wu Bin. Her face instantly changed into ecstasy. Then she rushed over without hesitation and shouted desperately, "Li! Li! My daughter is my mother! Hurry up and save mother!" The royal guards who were responsible for guarding immediately stopped Zhu Yan, who seemed to be crazy. Zhu Yan was no match for the royal guards. Soon she was pressed to the ground by a group of royal guards. But her limbs were still struggling desperately, and she kept shouting, "Li! Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Come and save me! I'm about to be crushed to death. Someone is dead. Someone is dead." Such a big movement even attracted the attention of the people around. Su Li naturally noticed it. In fact, she found Zhu Yan from the beginning and witnessed the whole process. But she pretended not to find it. "Butler, go and have a look," Su Li ordered. Wu Bin looked at Wu Bin's expression worriedly. But he still walked over with people. Hu Daiden, the leader of the royal guards, saw Wu Bin and immediately saluted. But Wu Bin reached out to stop him. Hu Daiden saw Su Li behind Wu Bin. He immediately straightened up and saluted. "Princess Li as well." Su Li nodded slightly and said softly, "Commander Hu, you are too polite. Mrs. Zhu and I have a relationship. Can you let me talk to her for a while?" As soon as Su Li said that, Wu Bin was relieved. Su Li had always forgiven Zhu Yan's mistakes without any bottom line. He was really afraid that Su Li would ask to release Zhu Yan, which would be difficult. Hu Daiden didn't think so much. He nodded with a smile and said, "I will obey the princess's order. It's just that all the prisoners must leave the city before noon. Princess, please make it short." Su Li shook her head and smiled faintly. "It's not 7 a.m. yet. It won't take so long. Sorry to bother you, Commander." "You flatter me." Hu Daiden revealed a flattered expression, but his heart was filled with endless benefits. He thought to himself that although this princess came from a commoner's background, her etiquette was even more attentive than those young ladies from influential families. It was really incredible. Hu Daiden took his men away. Wu Bin's men were no worse than the royal guards. They were enough to protect Su Li, Mai Li. Zhu Yan struggled to get up. Seeing that she was surrounded by people of Lord Rui's mansion, she was full of fear and hugged Su Li's thigh tightly. She said, "Li, I really know that I was wrong this time. For the sake that I picked you up and raised you up, please help me." Su Li slightly pursed her lips and bent down to gently push away Zhu Yan's hands, which were full of black mud. Then she gently turned her head and glanced at Wu Bin. Wu Bin immediately understood. He told everyone to turn their backs and not to see or listen. He also stood outside the circle of people and left the space for Su Li. Seeing that Su Li could have such great power with just a look, Zhu Yan was more hopeful. Now that Su Li was a princess, she could let him go with just a word. Su Li was silent. She squatted down and looked at Zhu Yan, who was only 1 foot away from her. She put her hand into her sleeve and took out a pot of wine and a wine cup. She slowly poured a cup of wine and sent it to Zhu Yan, who was at a loss. "Li, I asked you to help me leave, not to drink. Did you hear what I said?" Zhu Yan grabbed Su Li's hand with one hand, and some wine in the cup spilled out. Looking at her sleeve, which was wet by the wine, Su Li suddenly showed a charming smile. Her silvery laughter rang in Zhu Yan's ear. "Mother, if you drink this cup of farewell wine personally poured by me, maybe I will be in a good mood and help you." Zhu Yan's eyes shone brightly and she sat up straight. "Li, are you serious?" "Of course. When did I tell a lie?" Su Li's smile was as innocent as before. But Zhu Yan didn't know the meaning behind this innocent. It was not simple from the beginning. "I will drink." Zhu Yan grabbed the wine cup in Su Li's hand. She was afraid that Su Li would regret, so she drank it up and looked at Su Li with hope. But she was disappointed. Su Li still did nothing but smile more happily. "You lied to me." Zhu Yan angrily grabbed Su Li's neckline and stared at Su Li's calm eyes. Her eyes almost spurted fire. "You are my daughter and you should listen to me. Ask your men to go away and let me go. I promise that I will never trouble you again and will never come to Yunjing City again." Crack. Su Li grabbed Zhu Yan's hand with one hand and gradually exerted force. Even the sound of bones could be heard. Zhu Yan was so painful that her face was deformed and she was in a cold sweat. She never knew that Su Li, who was as thin as a paper person, had such great strength. She raised her head and caught a glimpse of Su Li's condescending eyes. She didn't know why she suddenly felt cold and stopped struggling. It turned out that Su Li was not a gentle cat that could always be kneaded at will. She didn't know when her momentum became terrible. It seemed that she was born in the royal family and was a proud girl surrounded by stars. Do you remember Mammy Zheng? She is missing, right? Su Li suddenly mentioned a person. Zhu Yan shivered and her face became paler with fear. Do you know where she is? Ha! Su Li chuckled and leaned to Zhu Yan's ear. She blew a gentle breath. I buried her in the old forest outside the Desu town. Zhu Yan's body trembled uncontrollably when she heard this. She said, How is it possible? At that time, you were only 14 years old. You were short and thin like a bean sprout. Mammy Zheng was half a body taller than you. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't dare to believe that Su Li had pretended to bear hardships and bullies all the time. She deliberately showed it. Didn't that mean that he, who bullied her like a fool, was a complete and utter fool? It turned out that it was not that she had a tough life, but that she had seen everything and avoided it in a way that she could not understand. And she had foolishly thought that it was God giving her a chance to live again and again. You tried to kill me several times. Mammy Zheng, the killers of the blood refining hall, and then you joined forces with Mam Suchui. I let you go and forgive you again and again. Do you know why? Su Li turned the wine glass in her hand. Her smile was like a devil in Zhu Yan's eyes, because I want to see what you and the third sister can do in this life. Watching you climb to the highest cliff and then throwing you down with my own hands, that feeling is the most wonderful, isn't it? Do you remember the binding pill you gave to Mammy Zheng? I remade it and gave it back to you. Enjoy the next journey. You don't have much time. Su Li stood up with a smile. The knot in her heart was untied. She was extremely relaxed at the moment. Zhu Yan's eyes were wide open, as if she saw Su Li for the first time. Such a ruthless, scheming and vicious woman. Was she really Su Li? Slap. She slapped herself several times desperately. That hurt. It was not a dream. Tears immediately flowed from her bloodshot eyes. She crazily grabbed Su Li's face. She was ferocious and horrible. You are a devil. You are not a human. I am your adoptive mother. How can you be so inhumane? If I die, don't think about living a good life. I will scratch your face. Catch her. Wu Bin immediately turned around and restrained the crazy Zhu Yan. The four of them pressed Zhu Yan's limbs respectively. Zhu Yan could only lie on the ground and groan. Su Li stood up and didn't even look at her. Everything around her seemed to be far away. Chapter 216. After Zhu Yan was dragged away by the royal guards, the street returned to peace. Su Li didn't look at Zhu Yan again and went back without looking back. Wu Bin was confused. The attitude of the miss to Zhu Yan seemed to be very different from the investigation. However, Zhu Yan abused the miss since she was a child. No matter how the miss treated Zhu Yan, it was reasonable. He should be happy that Zhu Yan was punished successfully. Thinking of this, Wu Bin followed Su Li happily. After returning to the affiliated school, Wu Bin took people back. Su Li drove away Yun Yi and others who followed her. She came to the addendum alone. In the middle of the table full of bottles and cans, there was a transparent, colorless glass bottle. Su Li came to the table and gently picked up the glass bottle. She squinted her eyes slightly. If she looked carefully in the bottle, she could see a transparent insect shadow wriggling slowly. This was the poisonous child mother insect that she made with the blood of Zhu Yan and the fifth sister Su Yusheng. The poisonous child mother insect had been drunk by Zhu Yan. If Zhu Yan died, the poisonous child mother insect in the bottle would also die. At the same time, she could see the changes of Zhu Yan's body through the poisonous child mother insect. After she refined the heart-rotting pill, it was not a poison that could kill people immediately. At least, Zhu Yan could reach the border of Dahan country alive. Fang Yuan should have set off at this time. I gave you enough opportunities. Let's see if you will show up or not, Su Li murmured to herself and rolled her eyes. The thing about Su Zipei almost failed miserably. What she saw was not the good luck of Zhu Yan and Su Zipei, but the pair of black hands behind them who constantly played tricks behind them. There must be someone behind the manipulator. Now the plan failed, but Zhu Yan and Su Zipei were not dead. If the manipulator was a cautious and ruthless person, he would definitely choose to kill them. So, there was a chance to see the real face of the manipulator. At this time, Mammy Li came in with a banknote and said helplessly, "Miss, you asked me to buy Su Zipei from the broker house. But the boss said that Su Zipei was bought yesterday." Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows. Yesterday was the day when Su Zipei was just sent to the broker house. It was absolutely strange that she was bought on the same day. Who bought it? Seeing that the miss really asked, Mammy Li came over and whispered, "The boss of the broker house didn't want to tell me at first. Later, I scared him with the name of Lord Rue's mansion. Finally, he told me that it was Wu Xiuxiu, the miss of the Wu family who bought Su Zipei." The Wu family? Su Li frowned slightly. After the Wu family was severely damaged, she hadn't heard the news of the Wu family for a long time. With Wu Xiuxiu's narrow-minded mind, it was impossible for her to hide so deeply. Her intuition told her that the person who attacked her was someone else. If she couldn't find out sooner, she would have to guard against that person at all times. However, she could more or less guess the reason why Wu Xiuxiu bought Su Zipei. Perhaps this ending was even more unacceptable for Su Zipei. "Nanny, you can go back to work." Su Li shook her head and said, "Since she has been bought, forget it. Lord Rue's mansion and the Wu family are like fire and water. It's impossible for me to get my third sister back." Mammy Li was a little relieved when she heard that. Although it was a pity that she couldn't see Su Zipei as a servant, when she thought of Wu Xiuxiu's unruly behavior, she also knew that Su Zipei's future life was absolutely not very good. At this moment, Su Zipei, who had lived in the Wu family nervously for a night and changed into maid clothes, was finally brought to Wu Xiuxiu. Wu Xiuxiu closed her eyes and half lay on the soft couch. The maid beside her carefully massaged her calf. Su Zipei walked in front of her, trembling with fear. She made a servant salute and stammered, "Slave, slave." Su Zipei pays respect to Miss Su. Wu Xiuxiu slightly opened her eyes and glanced at Su Zipei. She said lazily, "Su Zipei, are you the bitch's sister? You don't look so good." Speaking of this, the maid beside her gently reminded her. Wu Xiuxiu completely opened her eyes, and the maid immediately helped her tidy up her clothes. "Oh, I forgot that Su Li and you are not related by blood. You are now a slave, so you can't have a surname. Let me think of a name for you. How about Thin Horse?" Hearing this, the maids around her couldn't help but laugh. Even Wu Xiuxiu herself laughed. Su Zipei was so ashamed and angry that she almost bit her lips to bleed. She said, "I am not Thin Horse. I just entered the broker house for one day." Skinny horse was the most insulting word for women. Some girls from poor families were bought at low prices and sold at high prices by the middlemen. After they were bought by the rich, they could be abused at will, just like how they used weak horses. Such women were called skinny horses. The more skinny horses the middlemen raised, the more money they earned. Seeing that Su Zipei dared to resist, Wu Xiuxiu looked cold and said, "I didn't let you speak. How dare you refute? Huan, teach her a lesson. You will train her in the future. Let her know what kind of person is qualified to be my servant." "Yes, Mississippi," the little maid beside Wu Xiuxiu responded in a low voice and walked to Su Zipei with small steps. But she didn't show any mercy. She slapped Su Zipei several times. Su Zipei's mouth was full of blood. "Newcomer, you are no longer a miss from a big family. As a servant, you should act like one. Today you offended Mississippi. I must teach you a lesson." Stuff. Su Zipei screamed again and again. In a trance, she seemed to go back to 2 years ago. At that time, she asked someone to teach Su Li a lesson. Now, the tables had turned. Su Li became a princess, but she became the most humble maid. Seeing Su Zipei's miserable situation, Wu Xiuxiu was very happy. She couldn't torture Su Li, but she could torture the Su family. Only in this way could the hatred in her heart be relieved a little. "Sister, what are you doing? All of you stop." Wu Jin walked in and saw the scene. He stopped them. The maids stopped one after another and saluted respectfully. "First master." "Brother, why are you here?" Wu Xiuxiu's eyes were slightly bright. She quickly got up and greeted him. Her brother was busy these days. She was bored to death, so she vented her anger on Su Zipei. Unexpectedly, her brother came today. Wu Jin glanced at Su Zipei, who was beaten black and blue on the ground. He gently touched Wu Xiuxiu's nose and said, The Wu family is not the previous Wu family. You should restrain yourself." "It doesn't matter. She is Su Zipei. She is a slave. No matter how I abuse her, no one will know." "Su Zipei?" Wu Jin's eyes flickered slightly. "Which Su Zipei? Which Su Zipei can it be?" Wu Xiuxiu pouted and said coquettishly, "Brother, you come to see me. How can you talk like a slave? Play with me for a while." Wu Jin stared at Su Zipei, who bowed her head and cried. The sadness in his eyes disappeared immediately. He said, "Sister, it is wrong for you to do this. If you want to take revenge, I have a very special way." Wu Xiuxiu's interest was aroused. She grabbed Wu Jin's hand and almost leaned on her brother. She said, "Brother, you are the best. You can definitely come up with the most perfect way to help me vent my anger." Wu Jin reluctantly pulled away his sister, who was very clingy. But his chuckle echoed in the room. "This time, I will let you have enough fun." In the study of the east courtyard of the Ling mansion, Ling Xian was concentrating on sorting out the files that were sent in the morning. She put the most important ones at the top. These were the things that the master had to deal with immediately today. "Master, the Dongfang family will send real seniors to control the auction on the 8th day of the 12th lunar month." Ling Li nodded and took the file. He whispered softly, "It is a good opportunity to spy on the strength of Dongfang Shao. Let the secret department of the Shalu cult keep an eye on it." "Yes, master." Ling Imo took the file and retreated to the side. Ling Xian took another file and gently opened it. She said, "The spy found that Tianji country and Nanjiang country both sent princes to visit. They will arrive in 3 days." Ling Li slightly raised his eyebrows and bowed his head to ponder. The Wei family of Nanjiang country had always been restless and made enemies everywhere. It was not surprising that they came to Dahan country. But it was strange that the Tantai family, which had never cared about foreign affairs, would intervene in it. Let the people of the Tianya house be prepared. Nanjiang country and Tianji country should keep an eye on them. There can be no mistakes. In addition, how about the manpower of the auction house? Ling Qinglan smiled slightly. After he recovered, he didn't need to worry about overthinking and dying of poison. When it came to conspiracies, he was much more professional than Ling Li. Chapter 217. Seeing the excitement in Ling Qinglan's eyes, Ling Li smiled slightly. For a period of time, Ling Qinglan was extremely resistant to the identity of the Yinma cult. But now, he cared about the Yinma cult more than anyone else. After all, when he just took over the banner of Qinghu of the Yinma cult, although there were many capable people in the cult, it was a mess. Under his arrangement, it became orderly. What Ling Li learned in the previous life was to be alone. He could do well in the spiritual circle alone. But if he was asked to manage a big cult, he felt restrained and restricted. Ling Qinglan learned the art of war from his father when he was a child, and he showed his talent in this aspect very early. Later, although the Yi family was destroyed early, he was secretly adopted by the Ling family. At that time, the second uncle intended to let him take charge of the military affairs and make plans for the battle. But he chose to go to the supreme judiciary. On the one hand, it was for the Yinma cult. The deeper reason was the knot of the Yi family. No one was perfect, and he was not perfect. When it came to managing a sect, he was indeed no match for Ling Qinglan. He was ashamed of this. But when it came to martial arts and people's judgment, he was much better than Ling Qinglan. In the Yinma cult, Qinglan, take this. Ling Li took a file and gave it to Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan was slightly stunned. He took it and glanced at it. Then he quickly closed it and said calmly, I see. I will act according to my discretion. I won't be impulsive. The content of the file was the same as that given by Mr. Li. It was all about Qingong's wife. But he didn't let Ling Li know that he had already got the news. Otherwise, according to Ling Li's attitude towards Su Li, he would be hostile to Mr. Li. At that time, if Mr. Li was in trouble, it would be difficult for him to deal with it. Ling Li didn't notice Ling Qinglan's abnormality. No matter how serious the matter was, Ling Qinglan could keep extremely calm, which was quite similar to Ling Imo. After Ling Qinglan and Ling Imo took their orders and left, Ling Li leaned on the wheelchair and gently rubbed his eyebrows. There were too many things to think about recently. Ling Xian cleaned up the messy files on the table and poured a cup of his favorite tea for Ling Li. It was the tea tree that Master cultivated in Dahan country in the early years. Master often said that only he could understand the taste of tea. Now, this tea tree was planted in the backyard of the Pandemonium headquarters. It was looked after by a few old farmers who were good at planting, and it produced quite a lot of tea leaves every year. Ling Li frowned and slowly opened his eyes. Looking at Ling Xian's busy figure, he was silent for a moment and suddenly said, Ling Xian, do you have anything to hide from me? As soon as Ling Xian said that, the warm atmosphere in the room suddenly disappeared. Ling Li's cold eyes were full of questioning. The feeling of being almost destroyed hit Ling Xian's heart directly. She was slightly sad. In the end he still asked. If he told the truth, what would happen? She remembered that on the ship, Mr. Li's provocation made Master, who never showed his real feelings, so angry. What she did undoubtedly violated the taboo. From the beginning, she knew that she would only be farther away from Master. But Master, who she had accompanied for 10 years, was in love with someone else. When she thought of this, she couldn't help it. Master? Ling Xian's eyes were slightly red. She lowered her head and said, I have something to hide from you. I went out secretly these days and shouldn't delay the affairs of the cult. But recently, I heard the news of my biological parents, so Ling Li was surprised and faintly relieved. I see. You can ask people of the Tianya house to investigate this matter. Why do you do it yourself? Ling Xian shook her head with tears in her eyes. She whispered, recently, the Tianya house has been too busy. How can I delay the business? Back then, they abandoned this servant, but this servant met young Master. I don't hate them, but I don't want to see them again. I just want to take a look at them from a distance. That's enough. Ling Xian's words were sincere. Ling Li's doubt in his heart slowly faded. If Ling Xian said that she found out where her parents were, it was reasonable that she often peeped at them and didn't want to be followed by others. After all, she was the holy girl of the Yinma cult and the sacred symbol of the cult. If she showed her weakness, it would inevitably lose the prestige of the cult. Tell Ling Imo where your parents live and let him send someone to protect them secretly. Anyway, they are your biological parents. Don't hide this kind of thing from me next time. Ling Li's voice was low and gentle. Ling Xian felt warm and gently nodded. She had already found someone to pretend to be her biological parents. Finally, she passed the test. What is Su Li doing recently? Ling Li said suddenly, and the timing was perfect. Ling Xian almost blurted out Su Li's activities in the past few days. But she immediately realized it and whispered, I'm going to ask Ling Qinglan if there is any news. Seeing Ling Xian turn around and leave, the last doubt in Ling Li's eyes faded. He really didn't want to use this method to test Ling Xian. But if he didn't try, how could he rest assured? A woman's mind was the most difficult to fathom. Like Ling Shui, he had clearly handed over the Ling family to her and chose to become a mercenary to wander alone, but she still wanted to kill him. They were biological siblings. Why did she do this? He thought about the previous life and thought about it for more than 10 years in this life, but he still had no answer. Ling Xian gently closed the door and walked out of the yard. There was no one around. Finally, she couldn't help squatting down. Tears rolled down from her eyes. 8 years ago, the little girl shook the sleeves of the child and asked curiously, "Master, what kind of woman do you like?" Let me think about it. She should be more gentle and less unruly. I don't want to be entangled with a moody woman in my life. Because of what you said, I picked up a small fan, learned from everyone's etiquette, and served by your side, desperately trying to become the person you said. But Su Li was clearly unruly, unreasonable, and moody. Why did you see her in your eyes, in your heart, and in your mouth? I was clearly by your side, but you refused to look at me. Ling Xian clutched her chest and breathed softly. Something was hurting and breaking. She was unwilling to give up the result after waiting for 10 years. Child gradually changed. He never let personal feelings affect the affairs of the cult, but now because of Su Li he almost killed Mr. Li, who was beneficial to the cult. Su Li was a scourge. Ling Xian stopped crying and slowly calmed down. She wiped the tears from her eyes and ran the genuine energy. The redness and swelling around her eyes faded away. Her face returned to normal, and a black light flashed in her eyes. In most cases, the Inma cult was governed by the child's words. But if the decision made by the child was harmful to the cult, she could take advantage of it a lot. 3 days later, Tianji country and Nanjiang country arrived in Yunjing city on the same day as if they had discussed it. They wrote a letter to the emperor. The princes of the two countries visited on the same day. The Han country naturally attached great importance to it. It immediately sent Hu Dayden to greet them and lead them to live in the state guest building. The Zhongtan road was heavily guarded by the royal guards as in the previous 2 days. They escorted a large number of exotic teams and countless expensive exotic gifts. At the same time, intelligence agencies of countless forces in Yunjing city also took action. They collected the information of the princes of the two countries by all means. The Wei family of Nanjiang country sent the 4th prince and the 6th princess. They are Wei Yuran and Wei Zhenjin respectively. There is only one prince in Tianji country. But the news in Tianji country is always not well informed. I don't know the specific names of the princes. After reading the files sent by Chu Lu, Su Li couldn't help but ponder. They came to the Nanjiang country at this time for friendly exchanges on the surface, but everyone knew secretly that they came for the full moon and heartstrings at the auction. Su Li didn't expect that the full moon and heartstrings could be so attractive. In the spiritual circle, the full moon and heartstrings was not so precious. In the hands of the major sects, there were many more precious treasures in the Zifu. But now, she realized that she was in the secular world after all. There were very few people in the martial arts circle who could enter the spiritual circle. Although a warrior at the peak of the inborn realm with the full moon and heartstrings was not as good as a warrior in the longevity realm, he could definitely defeat an ordinary warrior at the peak of the inborn realm within 10 moves. To the various sects and family forces, it was an absolute deterrent. The Dongfang family could auction this kind of thing. Chapter 218. The next day, Dongfang Xiao, the emperor of the Dahan country, solemnly received the princes of the two countries. According to hundreds of officials, the two princes brought a lot of novel gifts. The atmosphere in the Yangxin Hall was harmonious. The emperor laughed several times and was very happy. Among them, it was worth mentioning that the mechanical man brought by the prince of the Tianji country could write automatically. Although it was just a few fixed blessings, it was enough to be amazing. The news quickly spread to all directions of Yunjing city. Su Li was in the affiliated school of the National Academy. Mammy Li also heard a lot and came back to tell the miss. But she didn't know that Su Li had already got more detailed information from Chu Lu. The trees were lush outside the house, and the sandalwood fragrance was curling up inside the house. It was really quiet. Su Li destroyed the file with one hand and narrowed her eyes slightly. She was lost in thought. In her previous life, after she achieved great cultivation, she returned to the Dahan country and focused on revenge. Except for investigating the origin of her disabled husband, she turned a deaf ear to everything else. She didn't have much contact with the Nanjiang country or the Tianji country. However, no matter whether the two princes came for the full moon and heartstrings or not, She had to find out the details of them, especially the Wei family. If she guessed right, the enemy of Fang Yuan and others was undoubtedly the Wei family. If she could, she didn't mind collecting some interest for Fang Yuan and others before the auction fair. And the Wanjian sect. Su Li rubbed her eyebrows and couldn't help but have a headache. When Tingshan learned a strange disguising skill. He could disguise others. Even warriors at the peak of the inborn realm couldn't see the clues. This brought convenience to everyone in the Linli building. But he couldn't disguise himself. What was more exaggerated was that no disguising skill or disguising elixir could work on his face. There was a life token of Wen Tingshan in the Wanjian sect. It contained Wen Tingshan's pneuma. It could be activated by a secret method to track Wen Tingshan's whereabouts. Although the scope of the secret method was very large, Wen Tingshan couldn't disguise himself. If the Wanjian sect and the Dongfang family united, it wouldn't take long to thoroughly investigate a person in Yunjing City. She had set a tactical matrix around Wen Tingshan's room to isolate Wen Tingshan's pneuma, but it was just a temporary measure. She needed to think of another plan to solve it. After breakfast, Su Li went out of the courtyard and entered the real National Academy with the books she borrowed from the National Book Tower 2 days ago. There was only a wall between the National Academy and the affiliated school of the National Academy. No one guarded it, so there was no need to show the jade token. At this moment, it was the morning class. There was a rhythmic sound of reading mixed with the shouts of practicing martial arts. Su Li stared at it and saw that the young warriors who had just entered the school were sweating profusely in the martial arts field. She went all the way to the National Book Tower. The forest road was deserted. At this time, no one went to the National Book Tower except for the lecturers who were resting in the National Academy. The arrogant gatekeeper checked Su Li's jade token and let her in as usual. With Dongfang Rui's relationship, the entire National Book Tower was open to her. She could even read the Xiangong mental methods collected by the National Academy on the top floor at will. Dongfang Rui said that if she wanted, she could also go to the study of the Dongfang family in the Imperial Palace. The cultivation method of the Dongfang family was the real trump card of the Dongfang family. Although Su Li wanted to have a look, she had to be afraid of the power behind Dongfang Shao. It was unwise to go there rashly. She didn't think that Dongfang Shao would show mercy to her because of his niece after he saw through her. Just as Su Li walked into the National Book Tower, 3 people came to the tower, 2 men and 1 woman. The one who led the way was the eldest prince, Dongfang Sheng. He had a faint smile on his face and looked dignified as the eldest prince. Along the way, he chatted happily with the other 2 people. When they came to the front of the book tower, he suddenly smiled and said, "Brother Yun, this is the holy land of our National Academy, the National Book Tower." The man who was called brother by Dongfang Sheng had a handsome face, but he exuded a feminine atmosphere. Although his smile was gentle, it always reminded people of the word viper. He looked up and down, nodded and praised, "It is really a magnificent building. Brother Sheng, can you take me and my sister in to have a look?" This person was the second prince of Nanjiang country, Wei Yuren. The charming woman with a somewhat barbaric temperament beside him was Wei Zhenjin, Wei Yuren's sister and also the heir of the empress. Of course, Wei Yuren's attitude was very humble. Dongfang Sheng enjoyed it very much and immediately took the 2 into the National Book Tower. Dongfang Sheng was the eldest son of the Dongfang family and the most orthodox bloodline of the Dongfang family. The old man who checked the jade token did not dare to neglect them and quickly let them in. His attitude was quite different from that of treating Su Li. This performance immediately made Dongfang Sheng proud and he was more happy. If he could entertain the brother and sister of the Wei family well, he could show a satisfactory answer in front of his father. In fact, he wanted to entertain the prince of Tianji country more. After all, the prince was the one who really made his father happy. Nanjiang country was just the second one. Unfortunately, the prince disappeared as soon as he left the imperial palace. He couldn't find him for a long time. Finally, he had to settle for the second one. A group of 3 people entered the National Book Tower. Wei Zhenjin, who walked at the back, muttered something in a very low voice. "What a magnificent building! It is made of bricks and stones. It is obviously a place where the dead live. It is really unlucky. Dongfang Xing did not hear Wei Zhenjin's words because he stepped into the tower at this moment and saw Su Li, who was about to go upstairs. His eyes were slightly bright and he immediately caught up with her. He did not forget to shout, "Sister Li, please wait." Su Li frowned slightly. She just noticed that there was someone at the door and wanted to go upstairs to hide, but she did not expect that she was still seen. In desperation, she could only go downstairs and came to Dongfang Xing. She saluted and said respectfully, "First Prince, Su Li." Su Li didn't wear any makeup today. She was plain and didn't look very amazing with her amazing beauty. However, her skin was fair and flawless, tender and smooth like a baby's. Her exquisite and small facial features set off an ethereal aura. Coupled with the few books in her arms, she gave off a clean and comfortable temperament. Wei Yuran looked at her for a few more times. The more he looked, the more surprised and amazed he was. How could there be such a clean woman in the world? She was like a lotus that had just emerged from the water, untainted by dust. Wei Zhenjin subconsciously touched her face and felt jealous in her heart. Although she did not want to admit it, the woman's skin was indeed better than hers. How did she maintain her skin? She must get the method. Dongfang Xing let out a gentle laugh and pretended to be intimate. He said, "Sister Li, you can't do that. You are 8th uncle's precious daughter and my cousin. If 8th uncle knows that you are so polite to me and I accept it calmly, he will blame me." Su Li chuckled and blinked her crystal-clear eyes. "That's my fault. I don't know why you stopped me, cousin brother." Knowing that Su Li was joking, Dongfang Xing was slightly relieved and hurriedly introduced the three people present to each other. However, there was always a thorn in his heart. The matter of the Hehuan sect. The paper could not cover the fire. It would be exposed one day. At that time, how would the 8th Lord treat him? Before that, if he could get Su Li's favor, he might be able to drive away the disaster in the future. This was also the reason why he stopped Su Li hurriedly after seeing her. "It turns out to be Princess Li. I am Wei Yuran of Nanjiang country. This is my sister Wei Zhenjin. Nice to meet you." Wei Yuran smiled politely and behaved like a gentleman. "Your Highness, you are so polite." Su Li also returned the courtesy with a gentle smile. Next, Su Li was invited to tour the National Academy together. On the surface, they talked happily and the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. During the tour, Wei Zhenjin asked Su Li about the method of skin maintenance. After Su Li helplessly said that it was natural, Wei Zhenjin obviously didn't believe it. She rolled her eyes and no one knew what she was thinking. Wei Yuran apologized for Wei Zhenjin repeatedly, but he didn't know that Su Li had seen through the background of the brother and sister without a trace. Wei Yuran, the acquired 9th hurdle. Wei Zhenjin, the acquired limit. The cultivation of the brother and sister was absolutely second to none in Dahan country. Among the 3 princes that she saw in the autumn hunting, the 5th prince, Dongfang Yang, had the highest cultivation. He was in the acquired 7th hurdle. Dongfang Lang and Dongfang Xing were both good at scheming, which delayed their practice. Their cultivation was lower than that of Dongfang Yang. They were only in the acquired 6th hurdle. The cultivation level of Nanjiang country was much higher than that of Dahan country. However, if Wei Zhenjin got the full moon and heartstrings, it was possible for her to dominate the martial arts circle and stabilize the situation in the future. Chapter 219. It was not until the evening that the 4 people finished their tour. Seeing that Su Li was about to leave, Wei Yuran quickly stopped her and said, "It's late. It's not safe for Princess Li to leave alone. Why don't we send you off first?" Before Wei Yuran finished his words, he was interrupted by Dongfang Xing with a smile. "Brother Yuran, don't worry. Sister Li lives in the National Academy. It's a treasure place for cultivating talents in our Dahan country. Even people at the peak of the inborn realm may not be able to leave here alive. Sister Li won't be in any danger." Then, Wei Yuran and Su Li both had the same idea. Dongfang Xing's unintentional words exposed the arrangement of the Dongfang family in the National Academy. Su Li suddenly understood why Wei Yuran didn't choose the third prince or the fifth prince, but chose the stupidest first prince. Su Li excused herself and turned away. Wei Yuran looked at her back and didn't move for a long time. Dongfang Xing couldn't help but tease, "Brother Yuran, she has gone far." Wei Yuran seemed to be awakened. He struggled and couldn't help but ask, "Brother Xing, there's one thing I don't understand. I shouldn't inquire about it according to the etiquette, but..." Dongfang Xing laughed. After a day, he had been coaxed by Wei Yuran. He immediately said, "Don't worry, Brother Yuran. The thing about Sister Li is not a big secret in Yunjing City. Let me explain it to you." Then, Dongfang Xing explained the reason clearly without any concealment. "So, Princess Li is also a master of medical circle and the first genius in Yunjing City?" Wei Yuran was amazed. He didn't expect that Su Li, who was very modest all the way, had so many identities. He subconsciously looked at his sister. Wei Zhenjin's eyes suddenly flashed with disdain and anger. How could a princess who grew up in the ordinary people compare with her? She was regarded as the first genius of Nanjiang country by her father since she was a child. She was the brightest pearl of the whole empire. But she was in the acquired 8th hurdle. How could she compete with me? Wei Zhenjin suddenly stopped being angry, and a hint of playfulness flashed in her eyes. This time, Nanjiang country used all its power just to get the full moon and heartstrings. When she broke through the inborn realm, her lifespan would be greatly increased, and she could even become a practitioner of the longevity realm. She would be beautiful forever. 100 years later, Su Li was just an old woman with a wrinkled face, or even a pile of yellow soil. She was too immature to care so much about a dead person. The more Wei Zhenjin thought about it, the more she felt that the future would develop like this. She raised her eyebrows and regained her arrogance. She stood still like a proud peacock and didn't look at Su Li's back anymore. Wei Yuran was shocked by his sister's sudden change. But Dongfang Xing was still there, so it was not appropriate for him to ask. He could only wait patiently until Dongfang Xing sent them back to the state guesthouse and left. Hearing his sister's amazing theory, Wei Yuran didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He touched his sister's head and said dotingly, "Zhenjin is certainly the best. I'm just a little surprised by Su Li's clean temperament. How can a common woman with some medical skills compare with our Zhenjin?" Wei Zhenjin still didn't give up. She pouted and said angrily, "No. I hate Su Li very much. I don't want to see her face again. Brother, please help me." Wei Yuran quickly coaxed his sister and said that he would deal with it after the auction fair. Wei Zhenjin also knew that the auction fair was the top priority. She didn't dare to make trouble at the moment and quietly ran to practice. She had always known that the reason why she was able to obtain the position of imperial father was not because of her imperial mother, nor was it because of her beauty. It was because of her exceptional talent for cultivation that she had displayed from the very beginning. At this moment, when Su Li returned to the affiliated school of the National Academy, she saw Mammy Li standing in front of the school in the front room with embarrassment. Mammy Li didn't know whether to go or go in. When she heard the footsteps, she turned around and saw Su Li coming back. She immediately greeted her and whispered, "Miss, there is a very strange young man in the school. No matter what I say, he doesn't leave. It seems that he can't hear me. And it seems that the people of the Lord Rue's mansion who are guarding outside didn't find him." Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows and looked at the back of the young man in white who was carrying her in the room. She asked Mammy Li to go to work first and walked into the empty school by herself. The light suddenly dimmed. The young man in white noticed that there was someone behind him. He turned around with a smile on his face. This was a strange face that Su Li had never seen before. But Su Li recognized his identity at a glance from the pneuma he exuded when he was practicing. "Senior fellow apprentice?" Su Li tried to sound him out with a smile. The young man laughed out. His voice was low and magnetic. "Junior sister apprentice, you have a keen intuition. I have obviously restrained my pneuma, but I was still recognized by you at a glance. I'm really ashamed." Su Li smiled slightly. This person's cultivation was not low. He had reached the inborn 5th hurdle. But it was not enough for him to completely restrain his pneuma in front of her. "Senior fellow apprentice, you come back suddenly. What's the matter?" Su Li walked over and picked up the teapot on the table. She poured a cup of tea for the young man with a slight smile. The young man took it, and his eyes flashed with surprise. He thought that Su Li would definitely be a little surprised to see him, even if her reaction was not very big. But Su Li's reaction was as plain water, not to mention surprise. Su Li seemed to be a little different from what his master said. The young man shook his head slightly and got rid of distracting thoughts. He smiled warmly and said, "This time, I am ordered to come here for junior sister apprentice." Ordered? Most of them were ordered by Qi Xianqing. Why did he come here for me? Su Li was slightly surprised and asked, "What do you mean?" The young man did not answer. Instead, he smiled and said, "Yunjing City will not be peaceful in the future. Junior sister apprentice, your cultivation is still shallow. It's better to go out less." Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. She suddenly asked, "Is it because of the auction on the 8th day of the 12th lunar month? I am afraid that you will be disappointed." Then she opened the drawer and took out a blue invitation to the Yunjing auction. The young man's pupils shrank slightly when he saw it. He asked, "Why do you have this thing?" "I am not the child in the master's words." Su Li said softly and finally took off a layer of disguise. She said, "Master asked me to live here to let me gain experience. I can think of these. If Master knows it, he will be happy." The young man looked at Su Li and fell into silence. Qi Xianqing asked him to go to Yunjing City for the auction and to protect his junior sister apprentice. In the master's words, his junior sister apprentice had always been an innocent, pure and kind girl next door. But when he really got in touch with her, he found that his junior sister apprentice's temperament had already been honed. She was not innocent, but scheming, which made her feel unpredictable. This kind of gap made it difficult for him to accept for a while. But what on earth did the junior sister apprentice experience in the past 6 months? The young man's eyes were slightly gloomy. He sat opposite to Su Li and drank tea quietly. He did not speak again. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. Unconsciously, the tea was drunk. The young man suddenly came to his sense and smiled warmly. He said, "I came in a hurry today, and I didn't bring any gift for you. I will come to bother you after I prepare. It's getting late. I should go." Su Li stood up to see him off. She said, "Senior fellow apprentice, it's good that you can come to see me. You don't need a gift. It's dangerous at night. Please be careful." The young man's eyes flashed and he still said with a smile, "Of course. As a senior fellow apprentice, I have the reason not to give you a gift." Then he didn't wait for Su Li to say anything. His figure melted into the darkness and quietly left. The night wind blew, and the young man flew all the way. After passing through a dark alley, he changed out of his white clothes and put on a light golden slim-fitting long robe and a white cloak. Behind him, there was an additional hunchbacked servant. The servant carefully put the luxurious golden crown on the young man and said softly, "Fourth Lord, during the time when you disappeared, people in the state guest house almost went crazy looking for you." The young man narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled coldly. He didn't want to answer. He was still thinking about Su Li at the moment. Although Su Li was polite just now, she didn't even ask his name. The first meeting with his junior sister apprentice was not ideal. However, he was not discouraged. As long as he figured out what happened to his junior sister apprentice in Yunjing this month, he could sort out the situation. Let's go back first. Looking at the pedestrians on the road, the young man stepped forward without taking a sedan chair. The manservant behind him immediately followed him quickly. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.